I'll call to order this night's meeting of the Sierra Madre City Council. Madam City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mayor Jean Goss,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Edward Garcia,
Present.
Councilmember Rachel Arizmendi,
Present.
Councilmember Kelly Creeves.
Here.
And Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Robert Parkhurst was previously excused. You have a quorum this evening.
Thank you, Madam City Clerk. Mayor Pro Tem Ed Garcia will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and inspiration.
If you're able, please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. In 14 days, we get to have our voices heard by having the right of voting. What a wonderful country and state that we live in to have this privilege. We can never rehear the preamble of the U.S. Constitution enough. Those first three words are vitally important. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. And following that preamble, right off the bat in Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution, our founding fathers set up the Congress. This sets up the supremacy of the people through our elected representatives. It is no coincidence that the creation of broad representation of the people was the first article in this vital document. After the creation of the executive and the judicial branches, Article 4 outlines the state's powers in relationship to one another, which leads us to the Constitution of the State of California. The preamble starts with those same beautiful words, we the people. Article 1 of our Constitution for the State of California sets up our rights. All people are by nature free and independent and have inalienable rights. Among those are enjoying and defending life and liberty, acquiring, possessing, and protecting property, and pursuing and obtaining safety, happiness, and privacy. The very next article in the California Constitution is Article 2, and that sets up our voting rights. As a son of an immigrant that emigrated here from communist Cuba, I do not take these rights for granted or lightly. According to a polling data service, I personally have voted in 33 elections since 1992, the first election following my 18th birthday. What an amazing process that creates opportunities so a disadvantaged son of an immigrant can sit here and represent this community. So as we approach November 8th with anticipation, some of us with a little bit of anxiety, let us take this privilege seriously and informed. Nobody said the process would be easy or even comfortable, but as Susan Henderson, the moderator for the last candidate forum said, on November 9th, we will all still be neighbors. And I hope we can reconcile differences and work together for a better world, a better country, and a better community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Very inspiring. I'd like us to turn our attention now to the meeting agenda for the evening, and I'd like to take a motion for amendment or approval.
So moved as presented.
Is there a second?
A second?
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We now have an agenda. I'd like to turn to our city attorney for a report out of closed session.
Thank you, Mayor. The City Council met in closed session to discuss existing litigation under Government Code Section 54956.9A. No reportable action was taken. The City Council also met in closed session to discuss anticipated litigation under Government Code Section 54956.9B. And again, no reportable action was taken.
Thank you, City Attorney Guragosian. And now I'd like to get a motion for approval for reading resolutions and ordinances.
I move to approve reading of resolutions and ordinances by title only.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. This is going quickly. We have three, count them, three sets of minutes in front of us, so I've looked at them, I'm okay. I'd like to see a motion for amendment or approval.
No amendment, move to approve as presented for all three meeting minutes, March 22, April 12, and July 26.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, minutes are approved. Which brings us to mayor and city council reports. Who would like to go first?
Mr. Mayor, I have a very, very short report. I have been the representative for Sierra Madre for the Council of Governments, or San Gabriel Valley. And I just wanted to share that probably the two areas of focus have really been in homelessness and transportation. And in as much that our concern in those general two areas is limited, you know, we continue to be involved because there are a lot of issues that, us as a region, we want to make sure that we have a unified voice in. But as we're thinking about the transition into the next city council and what assignments will look like, is just to be thoughtful about who can be represented for Sierra Madre and the San Gabriel Valley COG.
Thank you. Councilmember Arizmendi, Mayor Pro Tem.
I have no report since last meeting.
I have no report. The planning commission meeting was canceled last week, so there was nothing to report out from there.
Thank you. I did attend the Library Board of Trustees meeting last night. Deputy Director of Public Works Yanez briefed the board on the status of our library renovation project, which is very exciting. A request for proposal is going to go out at the end of this very week for architects to bid for the design of the library. The ad will run 30 to 45 days, and our target is to try to get 15 to 20 different bids. And in fact, the ad is going to be run both locally and nationally. We're really trying to do this right and really come in with a great design. So sometime after the turn of the year, we should be able to sit down and start to evaluate those bids. And one small item, but important item, I was notified last night at the meeting that the library will be closed Saturday, December 24th because of Christmas weekend. And I've been given some announcements that I'd like to read. First, I'd like to welcome the 7th and 8th grade students from St. Gregorio Hovsepian Armenian School and Sahag Mesrab Armenian Christian School. Today they toured our City Hall and Public Safety Building for an introduction to the inner workings of city government. So you're all smarter, right, as a result of being here? Great. And I'm really, really pleased that you're able to attend and see government in action. Come join the Community Services Department for some irresistible festivities. I didn't write that, but maybe I pulled it off, I'm not sure. Monday, October 31st from 3 o'clock to 8 o'clock p.m. is when we do our Halloween thing here in Sierra Madre. Trick-or-treating, costume contest, carnival games, specialty food trucks, and more. I believe there are flyers in the back to grab if you want more details, and you can certainly go to the social media for City of Sierra Madre to get more information. And one last item. Planning Commission has one expected vacancy. Anyone interested in filling this vacancy, please contact the city clerk's office for more information. That is a critical agency in our city, and we're really looking for some qualified volunteers to step up and help out. And that concludes my report. Which brings us to public comment on non-agenda items. If you'd like to come up and speak for up to 3 minutes on anything that is not on our agenda tonight, we'd love to have you. Preferably, we'd like to have a yellow card submitted beforehand.
You can pull down the microphone a little bit more.
There you go.
My name is Alina Agodjan, and I've lived in the city neighboring Sierra Madre my entire life. We are coming from Sahag Mesrab Armenian Christian School in Altadena. One thing that I found interesting was how the firefighters of Sierra Madre have been serving for over 100 years. What I like about the town of Sierra Madre is that everything you need is right next to each other, and it makes you feel comfortable. We got a behind-the-scenes look about how interesting the fire and police department works. Thank you, Sierra Madre City Council members, for your service in the community and for giving us the opportunity for us to be here.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Andrew Harding from the 8th grade at St. Gregory Hovsepian School. I am a member of this community and a former player from Sierra Madre Little League and now play at Sierra Madre Pony. I love this community. It's basically my second home. I structured my life around it and I really feel safe when I'm here. My grandparents and father grew up here and he also played at Sierra Madre Little League and Pony. He was a student at Sierra Madre Elementary School. My grandmother volunteered countless hours and was just honored last year as Spirit of Sierra Madre. If I could make one request, it'd be to maintenance the baseball field at Dapper a little better and put lights up. My favorite memory is probably every year's team parade, and then a close second is the Easter egg hunt every year. I feel really lucky to be a part of the Sierra Madre community because of its loving and kind people that live here. And then, can I recite a poem that I've been learning in class?
You're more than welcome to. Love to hear it.
Okay, it's called Mega Chanelov Musa Avelov by Nora Armani. She sweeps the street of our homeland, whistling to keep stray dogs away. She's old, she's rugged, she smiles a lot. As though lacking worries herself, her warm smile takes yours away. How does she feed? Where does she live? And you with your pearls, clad in Chanel. Did you see her? Did you look well?
Thank you. Very well done.
Mr. Mayor, we have a speaker card for Joel Goodwin.
Well, good evening, Mayor Goss and members of our city council. You guys all know me, Joel Gooden from the city of Sierra Madre here. Just calling to, following up on the last meeting when came up and gave a request. We're really desperate to get our turkey donation for our church, and we're looking for all the help there is because we're really in trouble. We're not getting any turkeys from our food bank, and we're asking for all the help there is. So anything you guys can do, we really would appreciate.
Oh, could you repeat what the church is?
Desperate.
Could you repeat the church name for everybody?
First Church of Nazarene
Right,
on
thank
Sierra Madre Boulevard, 3690 East Sierra Madre.
Perfect.
We're very desperate. We're not getting any turkeys from our food bank, and we're asking for all the help there is. We really need them by November 20th. We're asking for at least 600.
Oh, wow.
So any help, any donation you can give would be greatly appreciated.
Would the turkeys be actually dropped off at Paznats physically?
Correct.
Okay. What time? Do you know when that happens?
Hopefully any time during the day.
So there's someone there who
about
can take
dinner
it.
time
Okay.
on Thanksgiving.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe.
Mr. Mayor, the next speaker is Pat Elkhorn.
Mr. Mayor and City Council members, I would just like to thank the Sierra Madre Fire Department for their cooperation and their wonderful help on our CERT program that we had last week. We graduated 23 people, which is amazing, and there are 2 pending their makeup classes. So we're hoping that we're going to have a really, really strong team this year. So thank you so much. Our next meeting is on Thursday at 7 o'clock in the Hart Park House, and it'll be a hands-only CPR class that will be conducted by Code 3, the organization in town. So thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Elkhorn.
Mr. Mayor, there are no other speaker cards for items not on the agenda.
And we did receive emails.
There were a number of emails received, and they were forwarded to the City Council for consideration and uploaded to the city's website for transparency.
Thank you, Madam City Clerk. And that brings us to our first presentation for the evening, which is an update from Frontier on fiber optics installations in the city.
Mayor, I'd like to introduce Vice President of External Affairs, Douglas McAllister.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, thank you very much for the invitation to be here tonight. I normally am here much earlier in the Frontier build, because the primary purpose of my my visit is to introduce myself to you. I used to sit on your side of the dais for many, many years, and one of the things that I really did not like about that was walking into church, walking into a shopping center, walking someplace public, and getting lambasted for something, and I have to say, I have no idea what you're talking about. And one of my goals for any of our builds throughout California is to see to it that that doesn't happen to you, and but if it does, you have my cell number to call me to find out what they're talking about, so I can help get answers for those constituents. However, in this point, we are in a position where we're almost finished with the build. And so I kind of want to run through what we did for you and kind of give you an update for what that is. And as I begin to do that, I want to say thank you to the city manager, Jose. We met a couple times, and part of the process for this is for he and I, or his counterparts around the state that I work with, to kind of get on the same page so that we can make sure that everybody else that's involved plays nice. And we've had a couple of things we've had to deal with and stuff, and so he's kept me informed, and so I can escalate those to get those resolved. But for the most part, this has been a fairly smooth build. And I have to say thank you, Jose, for what you must have done to help make that happen. I tried to ride herd on my team as well, and so thank you for that. It's been one of the more enjoyable experiences that we've had. But for now, let me just walk you through what we did here. Let's go to the next slide, please. This is not a quote from Frontier. This is my summation of what's happened. This position that I hold as External Affairs is a brand new position for Frontier. They found me, brought me back. We used to be with Verizon years ago, and they brought me back to start a new position, which was External Affairs. But the whole purpose of that was to have a position where, and they mean this, I'm serious as a heart attack about this, they pay me, but I work for you. And the whole idea behind that is for me to be that point of contact for senior elected officials, for senior folks in both the cities and county governments, to provide the information, to provide the continuity, and also when things don't go right, because sometimes they don't, to help make sure they get fixed. And so what they decided, they did this because, and this is what I've observed, and this is the only reason I came back. They're in the middle of the biggest build in history when it comes to fiber optic cabling, and bring that out. And when I biggest build, I mean the biggest build. It's massive all over the nation here. And so their decision was, if we're going to do something bigger than we have ever done before, we better do business better than we've done before. And so this was one aspect of it. Now, it's the first dip of the toe into a new culture for the company. It's kind of like trying to change the direction of an ocean liner with a paddle. But it is the right direction, and that's the only reason I came back, because they, among all the utilities, they became committed for that. So that's kind of the context of where we're going. Next slide, please. I'm only going to talk to the first three here. My goal here is to be short and sweet. I don't want to answer questions you're not asking. You have a lot of folks here probably thinking, what's this guy doing up here? I want to try to answer those questions, but I don't want to answer more than you're asking. The first one on the left-hand side is fiber network is 100% fiber from our central office to a customer's home. This is a whole network that starts at a wire center and then ends up at the side of a customer's home, and it's all fiber optic all the way from start to finish. What's really cool about that is, among many things, is that it is one and done. Once we're done building this out, we don't have to come back and do it again when we come up with what people want more speed. We're talking about up to 2 gigs of speed here, and right now I can't imagine why you need 2 gigs. But there will come a day. There's going to come a day where they're going to say, oh, 2 gigs or so yesterday. We need 5 gigs now. Well, all we have to do is change a light in the wire center, and now we have 5 gigs. We have 10 gigs. We have 25 gigs. It allows us to be one and done in your city. So now that we're almost done here, you're already set up for the future. You're not going to have to come back and do this again. Second thing here is households can connect to multiple devices at once without worries. What you're providing to your constituents is something that goes against the grain. I read a study, I don't know, several months ago, that said the average number of devices in any given household is 22. I laughed. I said, there's no way. I mean, there's my wife, myself, and my cat in my house. And I got to counting, and I got to 15 devices in my house. And I thought, well, maybe that number's not so bad. Maybe it is pretty accurate. But what's nice about this is, as opposed to copper and DSL, all 15 of my devices, I have Frontier, and all 15 of my devices can be run all at the same time, and there's no slowdown at all. It allows for the kinds of speeds up and down. It doesn't matter how many people are on that or how many people on the street are on it, and so forth and so on. So it's a game changer when it comes to that. And then the last one I'm going to talk about here is number 3 there, high-speed internet Frontier. What we're offering is speeds up to 2 gigs per second. When I was back with Verizon about 10 years ago, we were doing this thing called FiOS. And I was told then, after being used to 18/2, that we're going to be provided with FiOS, I think 200 or 250 or something like that. Wow, I got that as fast as I could, loved it and everything else, and until recently was still thinking that was pretty good. I'm at 500 over 500 now, and holy cow, it's a major, major difference there, and that's what your constituents are going to have offered to them, or if they want 1 gig, they can do that, or the 2 gigs. So here's the point. When I was the mayor of Murrieta, and one of the things that we were able to accomplish was help turn Murrieta from just a bedroom community with no jobs to a biotech community with jobs. And what allowed us to do that was the attraction of FiOS at that time, but a broadband backbone. What is really interesting about today's reality is that post-COVID, folks are now used to working from home. With this kind of infrastructure that you're helping us provide to your constituents, they can do that and not have any slowdown. None of this buffering, none of this pixelating when they're doing Teams or Zoom calls. It is a game changer for businesses at home as well. Next slide. This is not so much about the prices, although they're there. This just talks about we have 3 options that people will see online that they could choose: 500 up and down. And these up and down mean it's symmetrical. It's 500 up and down. It's not 500 down and 5 up. It is exactly 500 up and down. Then you have you can do a gig, and then or you can do 2 gigs if you want. Maybe a gamer or something like that would like to have 2 gigs. I'm not sure. Next slide, please. I referred to this earlier. This is the pathway that we have already gone here in most of your city. Starts at the wire center, goes to a hub, and then from that hub handles several hundred residents. That then goes to a terminal, which handles 4 to 8 residents, and then finally ends up at the side of the house. And it's all fiber all the way through. And we can talk more about that if you'd like later, but I just wanted to show you the path that we came through and went through your city. Next slide. What we had tried to do, and I hope, Mr. City Manager, we did okay with this, is that we have tried to communicate with your residents as much as possible. Door hangers on the doors 72 hours in advance, signs in the yards, and anything else the city wanted. Last thing I wanted, or any of us wanted, was a resident to get up, have their coffee, come out, get their paper, and find construction in their front yard and not know why. We want to try to let them know it's coming and things like that. And so that was the communication that we tried to insist on. And I think in most cases we're successful. Every once in a while we had to slap a contractor's hand who didn't do it, but we were usually able to get those things fixed pretty quickly. Next slide, please. Okay, here we go. This is the build that we did in your city. I will tell you right now, and I don't have a pointer, but to the, well, I guess it's all of our lefts. To the left of the picture, towards Pasadena, you'll see a yellow area right there. We are still working on that one. And the reason for that is because we have to get a permit from City of Pasadena. About the middle of that picture, you see the brown area. That is the only other area that we're still working on, and that's because we had to change a path issue, and so we have to get another permit and then work through that process. But other than that, all those other areas, and the colors don't mean anything, that's just how it was built in each section. All those other areas are already done in your city as well. We passed 3,900 addresses just within your city. As of now, we're well over, probably over 90% done, except for those 2 areas right now. And we expect to be completed, well, for sure by the end of the year. And let's move on to the next slide. For questions. Okay, I can breathe. I just wanted to get you through that real brief introduction and see if you have any questions about any of this. Let's talk about them right now. Otherwise, the city manager has my cell phone number. I appreciate it if you don't put that on the website. But if you all folks have any questions, either call me directly on my cell, or Jose can reach out to me directly. So any questions at this point?
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. McAllister, for your presentation. I'm glad you're here today. It would have been nice if you were here earlier because we did have a lot of questions. Oh, you know, it's coming. Fiber is coming. I am very thankful I got in very early, and so I've been very happy with services. But 2 questions. So when my service was established, they still had to do they were thinking they had to do above ground, and they were thankfully able to get it below ground. Are you at a point in terms of infrastructure where it can just be pulled through the house, is my first question. And the second question is with respect to outages. I haven't experienced it, but I know we've had complaints throughout the city that there have been outages
Okay.
with Frontier.
Let me clarify the first question first. As far as undergrounding from, if it's an aerial and then underground it to your house, is that what you're asking for? As I understand it, the 2 options are aerial through the air
Have
to the house.
option of going aerial or underground.
Yeah, and the other option is to go underground, and that's a tech question. I'm not sure upon what they make that decision, but I'd like to think it's property owner preference, and so I will check into that and see what that policy is. So I just had mine installed yesterday. Yeah, I just had it yesterday, but they went underground for me for that.
And I do want to say, whoever worked on our house, they were absolutely amazing and patient.
That's
They
nice.
really did pull it through the house. It took hours, and they were extremely patient. I'm thankful. But at one point, they're like, I don't know, we're not even sure how to pull it to your house. So that was a question. Just
Okay.
in general, I think our houses in Sierra Madre are unusual, and they're not your typical
Yeah.
cookie cutter that are sitting on grids. So that was a question.
All I know is every time I drive in here, I decompress. So whatever you're doing, keep doing it. I love it. I'm sorry, I forgot your second question.
Outages.
Sorry?
Outages, that
Oh,
there have been
outages.
complaints. I have not experienced it, but
Okay.
we have had complaints about multiple outages.
Okay, I need to know about those. And so if I typically get reports every day, and I try to, any cities I'm working with, which is everything in California, I try to watch out for that and let you know ahead of time that some of these outages last 3 minutes, some of that last 3 days. It depends on if somebody cut a cable, we got to go back down and dig or whatever else. But I would, if I'm alerted, if I haven't alerted you, Jose, and if I'm alerted, I can escalate this to make sure the priority is to get it fixed now. And so we can work on that as well.
Great,
Okay.
thank you.
That's why I'm here working with you. Okay.
Other questions?
Yeah, yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Yes, thank you for your presentation. I think some of the concerns that we've heard were actually today, so it's very timely. But similarly, I've heard a couple people talk about maybe damage to their yard or as part of the construction process, and wondering sort of what the recourse is for that. They're having trouble.
Well, I gotta know about that.
Okay.
I gotta know about that. The rule of thumb is for our contractors is that they leave it as good or better than they found it.
Okay.
And if that's not occurring, I wanna know.
Okay.
I will deal with that, I promise you. It's not the residents' fault that we're there. If we damage something that's on their property, then I wanna know. Now, even if it's in the right of way, and there's grass in the right of way, and we put a hub there and such, when we're done, there should be grass where the hub is. I mean, we need to leave it as good as we found it or better. So I need to know about those things.
Councilmember Creeps, if I may add, there has been 1 or 2 occasions where I've been notified, and I've contacted Mr. McAllister, and he's responded right away and addressed the situation right away.
Okay, so I think we should just let residents know that that's maybe the communication path.
Yeah, I have absolutely no patience for that, so I do want to know.
Yes, thank you, Mr. McAllister. Great presentation, nice and quick.
We like
And yeah, this is something that was very important to me. We had our IT manager, Oscar, give a whole presentation on the different ways to bring fiber to Sierra Madre. You may have been listening because a month later, you guys were knocking on our door.
I wish I could take credit, but it was just timing. I just got lucky.
And we didn't have to go the private public partnership, so that worked out well, especially with your pricing relative to what we were paying before. I did get it early, and I'm grateful because we have changed the way we work, especially because of the upload speeds. Download was always pretty fast, but now we have upload speeds. We can upload to our servers at work or to Dropbox or whatever it might be. I found I'm not getting full gig personally, but it doesn't matter because I'm still able to do everything that I need to do when I do speed tests. But everything went well with the install. I'm pleased. Another complaint that I've been hearing, and I know we're an above ground city, is that the fiber is so thick, relative to everything else, and it sits lower than the power lines, and it obstructs views, and we have those big hubs, on every block. Is there any possibility that these ever go underground, or is this, always gonna be the way because we're an above ground infrastructure type city, is it all gonna be in our sight lines to the city lights?
There are probably answers that says yes to that. I don't know what they are. Usually it's a matter of evolution when it comes to that, and sometimes it's a matter of a public-private partnership that goes there. Sometimes there's grant money available for things like that. I do know there's rules about that. I imagine where you see the fiber where it's thicker, that's what's going to the hubs you're seeing. From there, it's very small wires. You get a lot on that fiber. It's light and it gets that way. So it's probably, unfortunately, the bigger wires are probably out where everybody is, on the main thoroughfares, and that's what they're seeing. And so that is the nature of the beast. However, I put myself back where I used to sit, and my answer would be, well, let's find a way. You got to find a way to yes. And so perhaps as a discussion, we can continue going forward to find a way, see how we can partner to make something like that happen.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for coming tonight. Very, very important that you're here, and we're really pleased to have this as an option for our residents. In fact, when we heard that this was going to happen, we were kind of shocked because we thought that this was going to be something that's going to take a lot longer. And so I'm very, very positive and happy about it. Haven't set up myself yet, but planning to fairly soon. I have had some complaints from people who've had bad construction problems, and three that I know of, two involved the kinds of construction issues that happen in front of somebody's property and were just left. And it took quite some time to get some remediation. In fact, our staff was intervened in both cases, and they're good now. The third is still open-ended. There's still some construction damage, and this lady has been
Really?
very emphatic to me that she needs somebody to come out and fix the damage. So and this is a fairly recent one. So I think this communication line you're talking about sounds great, but maybe I can direct the city staff to get in contact with you about this particular individual.
Let me know exactly who it is, where it is,
Yeah.
and then I will take care of it.
Okay. But I don't want to be a downer, because I think the services you guys are offering are amazing. Any other questions?
Okay. Then, if there are no more questions, I will say, once again, you have my cell number. Either personally can have it or through Jose. We're not quite done. We've got those two more sections and such, and so I want to know. If something isn't going quite right, I want to know about it. And if you have any questions going forward, you know how to find me. That's what I'm for, and I look forward to working with you in the future. And congratulations, you've got this. A whole lot of other places are just dying to get it yet, and we're still working on them. So I appreciate you guys letting me come tonight.
Thank you, Mr. McAllister.
Thank you. Take care.
Mayor.
And now we have another presentation by Southern California Edison, which I believe will also address the recent Canyon power outage.
Good evening, Mayor Goss, City Council, and City Manager Reynoso. Thank you for having me here today. I'm Jeanette Soriano. I'm Government Relations Manager with Southern California. I've worked with the City of Sierra Madre since I've started with Edison 4.5 years ago, and it's such a pleasure to be here again in person. It's been a couple of years due to the pandemic. So thank you for having us here today. I heard that you like a brief presentation, so even though I have lots of slides, the first half of my deck will be more background and just to have for reference once the questions come. But the meat will start around slide 15. But first, I want to actually give a special thank you to Councilmember Arizmendi. She's been a member of Edison's Government Advisory Panel for several years, representing the community of Sierra Madre, customers, our government entities, and she's been a great partner, asking tough questions and giving us feedback, and we greatly appreciate and we'll miss her as she cycles off the City Council, so thank you very much. We'll move on to the next slide, please. Just really briefly, Southern California Edison, we've been in the community for over 135 years providing electricity to our communities. We have 50,000 square miles throughout Southern California, serving 15 million residents through 5 million customer accounts. Next slide, please. Just a look at what the grid looks like. We start with generation, we go through the transmission, go into sub-transmission, which I'll bring up later today, and then down to distribution, and that's the wires that go to our houses and our businesses. And that's just a brief snapshot of all the poles and the circuits and the miles of transmission and distribution lines that we work with every day. Next slide, please. We are very much focused on modernizing and strengthening our grid, both to protect our communities through our wildfire mitigation efforts, as well as to prepare our communities for the future. As the state of California has set some very ambitious goals for greenhouse gas reduction through electrification. And so Edison, over 10 years ago, essentially decided that was going to be our business goals, is to align with the state of California. And so we've been planning for this transition to electrification for a while now. When I first started, this slide said that we plan to invest $4 billion every year, and now it's up to $5 billion. And a lot of that is due to our protection, our wildfire mitigation efforts, as well as these grid upgrades to make sure we modernize. And we have some good news later on in the presentation. Next slide, please. Just a very, it's kind of an eye chart here, but this is a great summary of all our efforts towards wildfire mitigation. Everything from inspections. We have an annual inspection process where we go out and, boots on the ground, as well as drones in the sky. We will inspect our poles, our wires, all our equipment, and anything that is deemed to be potentially unsafe or needing upgrades, we will put that on the list for to do. And occasionally we do come across what's considered P1 or emergent work, where it needs to be dealt with immediately. And so a lot of times, as much as we would try to notify, when it's an emergency situation, we will correct it immediately for public safety and then notify after. Then we have, up in the upper right corner, vegetation management, which is very important, especially in a community such as Sierra Madre, where you drive in and you instantly feel calmer, and I think it's because of your trees. But however, trees and wires don't mix, and so we do have some very stringent regulations set by the state in terms of how far trees have to be from the wires, and so that's another area where we work with our cities to get the proper permitting, to have a schedule for vegetation management. To harden our grid, we've deployed a program to install covered conductor on our wires. So these are insulated wires, not insulated to the point where you can touch them. We never want to touch a wire. However, if a palm frond should fall or if a critter should get caught, it stops the spark from happening, right? And so that's of the utmost importance, especially here in our foothill communities where we have the wildland and urban interface. Prevention of wildfires is of utmost importance to us. So we have an ambitious program that we've put forward to the CPUC, and this year, they were going to cut it more than half. And so through the efforts of our stakeholders who went to the CPUC and basically emphasized the importance of wildfire mitigation in their communities, we were able to bump that back up. So our investments in wildfire, especially with the covered conductor, will continue for the next several years. There's a lot of other things here that you can look at later, but undergrounding is somewhat an option, but we found that covered conductor is really the most cost-effective way to prevent fires. It's 10 times less expensive, and we've seen that it reduces the risk of fire by anywhere from 70 to 80% in our communities, as we've been doing it over the past couple of years. So if later on you have questions on wildfire mitigation, more than happy to answer those or come back later. Next slide, please. Just a snapshot of our activities over the last year. In 2021, we far exceeded all of our goals with all our wildfire mitigation activities. And so we can talk about that later on as well. Next slide, please. In addition to our wildfire mitigation, we are on our pathway to 2045 to ensure that California can reach carbon neutrality, reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, and we have 4 pillars. One is we decarbonize the electric sector, and our goal is to have 100% of our retail sales come from carbon-free electricity sources. The second is we will electrify transportation with the goal of 75% of vehicles being electric by 2045. Because that is the -- 1 source of pollution. In addition to electrifying buildings, the goal that we see it is to have 70% of new buildings electrified by 2045. You know, as we've seen this year, especially as we're going to discuss later with the heat storm that we experienced over Labor Day, more and more we are seeing extreme temperature. We are having health issues related to pollution, related to the climate change, and so it's really urgent now that we address these issues. We just came out with a recent study where we're showing that we're making progress towards our greenhouse gas reduction goals. We're reducing it by 1% a year, but really if we're going to meet the state of California's goals by 2030, 2045, we need to reduce it by 4% a year. So we are partnering with our local cities to make that a reality. Next slide, please. So this is actually what I was just talking about. So we need to actually reduce it by 4 times what we have now. Next slide, please. So we spoke about wildfire, we spoke about clean energy, but now let's speak about the bread and butter of our business, reliability. So in simplest terms, having dependable electricity when you need it is the definition of reliability, and that is what we strive for. When, we kind of suffer from our own success because nobody really thinks about us until they flip that switch and it doesn't turn on. But outages are a fact of life with electricity. They will happen from now and again. But it's really important to understand the different types of outages. So maintenance outages, those are the planned outages that we do to continuously upgrade our grid to ensure that for safety reasons and for reliability, that we update the grid. And so those outages, our customers will receive notifications for those within 7 to 10 days before the outages. And they can go into their account to set their preferences for notifications either through text, phone, email, whatever they prefer. Then we have repair outages. Those are the unplanned outages. In these communities especially, you have critters, squirrels that get caught in the lines, you have vegetation, you have car hit pole, or just any number of situations that might cause an unplanned outage, right? And so those are the ones that we don't know about ahead of time. We know about them basically when it's either reported to us by our customers or it shows up in our systems. And so with repair outages, whenever the lights go out, it's very important for our customers to get in contact with us either through the website or through our hotline, which is 1-800-611-1911, to report the outage, because we may not know about it. And the sooner you report it, the sooner that outage gets in the repair queue. Then related to our wildfire mitigation efforts, we have public safety power shutoffs, in which as a measure of last resort, Edison will shut off the power to prevent fires. And that's based on weather data, on the ground weather conditions, the fuel conditions, how dry it is, whether there's winds. The good news is that although Sierra Madre, all the circuits are high fire risk area circuits, in the past 4 years that we've been doing PSPS, a Sierra Madre circuit has never been on the list of concern. Not to say that it wouldn't happen, but it just hasn't been, so that's really good news. And then we have major event days, which I believe the outages over the Labor Day weekend might count as one of those. Next slide, please. So just the causes for outages, you have equipment failure, vegetation and animal. You have other, where maybe the circuit was patrolled but no cause was found. What I've heard is that many times that is probably also due to vegetation and animal, but there just wasn't evidence, right, to list it as such. Then you have operations outages. These are the urgent maintenance that occurs without the standard 3-day notice. You have third party, such as Mylar balloons, car hit poles, or someone's digging in without calling 811 first. And then you have the PSPS. Next slide. So now we're talking about Sierra Madre. So there are 8 circuits that serve Sierra Madre, and you'll see the names of the circuits, and then right next to it you'll see a number, either 16 kV or you have some that are basically 4.16 kV. So the 4 kV circuits, those are your older circuits. They serve less customers, they have less capacity. And then you have your 16 kV, which is at this point is the best of the best, the newest, the most updated. It serves more customers, it has higher capacity. And so you can see there we have the Arboretum, the Baldwin, the Gloria, the St. Joe circuits are all 16 kV. Next slide, please. And then that's the map of Sierra Madre, and then it's kind of hard to see, but you'll see the different colored lines, and those are the different circuits. A circuit that's listed in red is a high-fire PSPS circuit, so it looks like 6 out of the 8 circuits that serve Sierra Madre are high-fire circuits. Next. So in the past, when we have these reliability reports that we put online, and they're put online once a year for everyone to see, and we would include a map of capital improvements of the foreseeable future. However, that was a static map that very quickly became outdated. Well, what we rolled out this year was an online capital improvements plan that is updated monthly. So anybody can go to sce.com/capital improvements, type in, let's say the name of the city, and it will show you what's the planned work in the area that month. So if you go to the next slide, this is the map I pulled last week. And so you'll see on the upper left, I put in Sierra Madre and zoomed in on the city. And then on the right side, you'll see the layers and the legend of what each little symbol means. And so most of the work that's planned over the next month or through the end of the year here in Sierra Madre is a lot of pole upgrades. So that's what the little purple circles mean. And then this map also shows you where our weather stations are located. So that's another tool we have in our wildfire mitigation strategy, is to have this situational awareness. We have weather cameras in our communities that give us really surgical precision in terms of knowledge of the local weather conditions. And that's what really helps us to decide which communities should go on our list of possible preemptive outages. Next slide, please. So now we get to the heart of the matter, the canyon outages that occurred over the Labor Day weekend. These outages occurred on the Lowell circuit, and on the right you'll see a zoomed in map of that circuit, and it affected our community here in Sierra Madre. And I wanted to be clear about this because I know we had, you had public comment, a letter that was sent in that from concerned customers that experienced those outages, and they weren't quite sure what type of outage that was, why they didn't get notified. Was it because of a flex alert? Was it because of the preemptive power outages? And so I wanted to make sure you all knew this was a repair outage. So this is one of those unplanned outages that occurred and we addressed. This outage also occurred during a unprecedented heat storm that the region was experiencing. If you recall, I believe it was 10 days of higher than normal temperatures. And so these outages really happened during the peak of that heat storm. The first outage began on Friday, September 2nd, around 2 in the afternoon. And at its peak, it impacted about 682 customers. However, that was only for a few hours. However, there were subsequent outages over the course of the weekend that affected smaller groups of customers as we continue to stabilize the circuit. But the primary cause for this repair outage was a phase imbalance on the circuit due to the ongoing heat wave, due to the increased levels of usage because of the high heat. Next slide, please. So more detailed description here. Again, I gave the context. CAISO, which is the California Independent System Operator, that's basically the state agency that controls the electricity usage throughout the state. They basically estimated that the daily temperatures were 10 to 18 degrees warmer than average during this 10-day span. And the heaviest demand for electricity actually was going to peak around Labor Day. So this is right when this was happening over that weekend. And I already mentioned when the outage first began. So we found it necessary to temporarily shut off customers to rebalance the local grid. And I forgot, I've neglected to mention my colleagues who are here. We have Albert Diaz, who is the district manager for our Monrovia district, and he really oversees the work that's done to the grid in this area. And then I have my colleague Robert Steens, who's a senior advisor in our local public affairs. But however, the other hat he wears is he's also a liaison officer during our emergency activations. He's, you know, the best of the best, and when you hear PSPS, he's on there. He's a great coach, but you know, he knows everything there is to know about SCE and emergency activations. And so he was actually the LNO, which is the liaison officer on duty during these outages. So I did want to turn it over to Albert, because he really has that technical information, all the details about what was necessary to be done on the grid and why these outages continued throughout the weekend. So I'll pass it over to Albert.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. And I do want to apologize for the inconveniences that the outages in early September did cause. As Jeanette mentioned, they were due to an imbalance in the circuit. The outages weren't very long in nature because we did have crews already on the way there before it even happened, because we started getting alarms at our substation. More importantly, I think going forward, the plan that we've put together, so I personally have been working with our engineering department to try and come up with a plan to prevent this from happening in the future. You know, we not only did we have the outage problems, but we also did have low voltage. So some residents experienced low voltage, and what that means is they weren't able to operate some of their appliances, their air conditioners. So that is also a great concern, because that was actually longer than the outages, and it's a bigger concern for myself. The plan that we've put together is to cut the circuit over to a 16 kV circuit. Now that's going to take some time. It's very intrusive. It's pretty much a rebuild of the entire Lowell circuit. The Lowell circuit, it primarily feeds the Canyon community. The cutover is proposed to begin in Q1 of 2024. In the interim, though, you're probably thinking, well, what are we going to do in 2023? So we have come up with a plan for 2023, which we will cut over a portion of the Lowell in 2023, which would give us enough bandwidth in that circuit to be able to sustain the circuit stability through the summer of 2023. And then in 2024, we will finish the remainder of the cutover. By the time it's completed, you know, Jeanette mentioned covered conductor. You'll have brand new covered conductor in the entire circuit. You know, it'll be brand new transformers, brand new wires. It'll be a completely rebuilt circuit, which obviously hasn't happened since the circuit was originally built. Yeah, so the outages in this particular area, since it is a high fire area, in order to re-energize, we do have to patrol the entire circuit before we even attempt to test the circuit. And again, that's because we want to make sure there's nothing in the lines and it doesn't cause a fire, right? And safety is our #1 concern. So in a high fire area, you will see our troublemen out there when you do have an outage patrolling, and that is why it takes a little bit longer than it typically would in another area, or when we're not in a high fire season.
Thank you, Albert. Next slide, please. So, as he mentioned, there were a number of outages that weekend to rebalance the circuit, and so recognizing the inconvenience that was for the community, especially during these time of high heat, we did send out a community crew vehicle that stationed itself at the senior center on Labor Day from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m., and we worked with city staff to coordinate that. Safe physical distancing practices were observed, and water, ice vouchers, resiliency kits, and light snacks were provided, in addition to restroom access, so anyone who needed a reprieve from the high temperatures and the lack of electricity could come by the Community Resource Center. The CRC was staffed with SCE representatives who provided customers with updated outage information, who showed them how to sign up for alerts through their My Account on SCE.com, and then also help them power up their mobile devices through our vehicle that we had there. Next slide, please. So I wanted to provide these outage and restoration resources that we would be very happy for the city to share through their communication channels. With customers, the one number that I would like them to know to always call for outages is our outage and electrical hazards hotline. So if the power goes out, you can call that number. If you kind of see a low-hanging wire and you're concerned, you can call that number and report it. And what that number does, it actually skips a bunch of the menus that you would typically find in our customer service line and just go directly to that outage menu, and eventually pretty quickly get to an actual live person to report. Or you can also go online to report any outage. But it's critical for the customer themselves to report it, because there are questions like, for instance, if the city manager Reynoso or I try to report it, we don't have the correct contact number, or we don't know if there's a locked gate or a dog, so it's really important for the customer to call in. One very great tool that we have that we've developed over the past couple of years is our Power Outage Awareness Map, which, if we could go to the next slide, this is an image from our website. And basically now this map is so comprehensive, it includes current outages, upcoming outages, potential PSPS outages. You can search by address, or if you received a notification, you can search by the outage number or your meter number, and it will pull up information on any outage that is impacting that address. Or you can type in a city and it'll show what's going on in that city. So really encourage usage of that Power Outage Awareness Map. And it's gotten to the point where basically our crews out in the field will put in the update into the tablet or their phones, and basically 15 minutes later it shows up on the website. So anybody will have the most updated information. And actually, the only better source would be the actual crews on the ground, but you don't want to go ask them, because then you're delaying the work or possibly creating an unsafe situation. So don't go to the crews, go to the map. Next slide, please. And so the city, obviously, you will get phone calls, you will get concerned residents calling you. And so we have an outage escalation protocol that the city can use either on their behalf or on your own behalf for your own accounts, or on behalf of a customer. So first of all, definitely want to encourage customers to sign up for the outage alerts, but also to report online and either to the website or the hotline. Second, the city can contact their assigned business customer division account manager with the service order number that they'll receive when they report the outage. And that BCD account manager can then help investigate or escalate the issue. And then the city can also email the outage communications team, and I've provided that email separately because it is a non-public email. There are some other phone numbers and emails that I've provided to City Manager Reynoso that are non-public. One is a 24/7 hotline that is only to be used by first responders or emergency personnel, and that is for like a life-threatening emergency. There's a wire down or whatnot, and it's not to be used to get information on outages, but that's for the fire department and the police to use. But then there are other emails and numbers that can be used during emergency activations. But for checking on outages, it's basically, working with the BCD account manager and the outage communications team. But just wanted to note that these are the protocols we have during blue sky, when things are pretty much normal. In an event of an emergency activation or a heat storm, when we have a whole bunch of activity going on, these protocols are suspended, right? And so what Edison does is we go into an incident management team structure, and we address issues based on emergency priority and whatnot. And so, but always the outage map will have the most up-to-date information. Next. And some more helpful information for you and the residents of Sierra Madre. And any questions? Next slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that presentation, Jeanette. Questions?
Sure. We're so polite. Thank you. This was incredibly informative. I guess, I have lots of questions, but I think I will focus primarily on the work to improve the Lowell circuit, because I think that's going to be the utmost concern for our residents, especially the residents in that area. And it sounds like it's obviously going to be quite an undertaking, but they are all above ground lines, as far as you know, and so this isn't going to require trenching or digging into the ground. This is all going to be replacement above ground.
We'll pass it on to Albert.
Sure.
So about 95% of the circuit is above ground. There's a really small portion that is underground. We haven't really got in there to take a look to see if we're going to be able to use the existing duct or if we're going to have to retrench. So that's part of our planning stage, but it's a really small percentage of the circuit.
And when you say there's a ability to upgrade a portion of it to be prepared for next summer, is that actually doing the same work but just on a smaller portion of it, or is there something you can do internally that will improve the performance before you have to actually undertake the full project of replacing?
So it's the same work, but in this particular area, which is down on Alegria Avenue and Laurel Avenue, we have both 16 kV and 4 kV in that area. So we're able to remove that relatively quickly without impacting the rest of the circuit. And by removing the amount of load that's in that particular area, that will give us sufficient for several years. But obviously, the 2024, we will cut the entire thing over. So the Alegria and Laurel will have the brand new covered conductor, brand new transformers. It'll be a brand new infrastructure in that.
And this will be one of those planned outages, planned maintenance. We'll follow that protocol that Jeanette went over earlier in her presentation in terms of notices going out, people being aware of this work going on, because obviously it's planned and scheduled.
That's correct. And especially once we do get into the canyon areas, there's going to be a lot of communication with the residents, because some of those streets are real narrow where our trucks barely fit. So there'll be a lot of street closures, but we'll be sure to notify residents and keep the city informed as we have a plan and exact dates on when we're going to have outages and when we'll have street closures.
And how long, I know best laid plans, but how long would you expect, from the second phase that would begin in 2024, is that a 3-month project, a 12-month project? What is sort of the overall target?
My best guesstimate right now would be about a 2-month project.
Great. Thank you.
Other questions?
Just I don't know if it's questions, but maybe commentary. So thank you for your presentation. Very encouraging to hear about the whole revamping of the Lowell circuit. Obviously, we would like it to be sooner. So any word we can put in for that to expedite it. But again, reassuring to hear that, and there's no question, Jeanette and I have spoken about the Lowell outage, and there was just so much frustration during that time. And I know it's nothing that you could have anticipated. 114 degrees, multiple days over 100, it was unheard of. And I'm hoping that we can learn from that outage and maybe escalate, maybe in communication or in I think with the work that you did at the senior center and doing some community support, I think was great, and maybe to consider that earlier. God forbid this ever happens again. But again, I think a lot of lessons learned. And I do want to thank you for whatever escalation was done during the October 12th-ish. And I remember I'd just gotten back from vacation and I had heard something pop, and I'm like, what is that? And everything went out. But I think that one was able to be resolved in maybe 4 or 5 hours. So again, I know that there's a lot of whack-a-mole for less of a descriptive word that I can think of, what you have to deal with entire grid. So I thank you for that responsiveness, and hopefully we can learn from the Lowell outage.
And actually, I did forget to mention one other upgrade that will be happening and that I've spoken to City Manager Reynoso about. So Albert works on our distribution grid, and then at another level we have our substations. And so the Sierra Madre substation is actually also up for upgrading, and that project is slated to begin in the fall of 2023. And so I did speak with City Manager because we will need to be able to partner with the city in terms of relocating some equipment temporarily as we make upgrades at the substation. And so that's slated to begin in 2023. And so since it's the substation, it feeds 4 circuits, including the Lowell circuit, so that will also lead to increased reliability as well. So
Thank you.
lots of great news today and lessons learned.
You have any questions?
Yeah, I just think Councilmember Krebs and Arizmendi kind of hit on the points and the commentary that I was looking for. Jeanette, thank you. You were very responsive in that weekend in September. You know, a lot of the residents don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but as far as I could see from behind the curtain, you were responsive. After action report came, and then this after action report for the whole community is very important for our residents to hear. So thank you for an extensive recap of what happened, what's to come. Yeah, it's very important, you know, as we think about the canyon and the residents there. It's not easy to get out of there. There are older people there, and as you know, their air conditioning is going down, and they're in harm's way. Thankfully, we have excellent public safety here, and they were patrolling the area, making sure that residents were okay, knocking on doors. And I want to thank you for providing water and ice. The residents were very grateful for that. And to Mayor or Councilmember Arizmendi's point, if you could in any way try to, you know, anticipate that and have that kind of program ready to roll when we experience an outage again, that would be great for our community members. But I'm very grateful for your responsiveness.
Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate that. And you did remind me, so we have learned over the past couple years, and so prior to this heat wave, we knew it was coming, and we actually pre-deployed transformers, and that actually shortened our response time this time around. And due to the work we've been doing on our grid, we actually had less than the anticipated number of outages given the severity of the heat. So, you know, it's never a good time to have an outage, and especially with our customers who are more vulnerable. And that reminds me also, we have a program called the Medical Baseline Program, and I think it's in the grid and the deck, but I can also send a link over for customers who rely on energy for medical needs. It can be anything from just needing the air conditioning to CPAP machine, or something more severe, and those are our critical care customers, meaning if they're not without electricity for 2 hours, that's a life-threatening emergency. So they can self-report through a program, an application that we have with a letter from their doctor, and that allows them to have more of the tier 1 usage, kilowatts, in their bill, so it's a lower bill. But then it also, we know that they exist, because otherwise we don't know if they have a medical need, right, unless they self-report. So thank you for, that reminder.
Yeah, thank you for that. And, what's on everyone's mind as we're getting to more electrification of vehicles and we're getting rid of, potentially getting rid of gas within our homes, we're going to have a higher demand on the grid. Going from 4 kV to 16 kV, does that resolve that for our city? I know you kind of touched on it within the slide deck. You're looking to 2045 and 2030 to get these things, these goals implemented.
So it definitely increases the capacity. And so did you want to maybe say a little bit more about increasing to 16 kV?
Yes, so our 16 kV circuits are the latest and greatest, and there's still plenty of room on our 16 kV circuits. And we also do a 5 and a 10-year forecast. Our engineering department does, where they forecast how much the load's going to go up, and we get well ahead of that on our 16 kV circuits. So it's definitely the latest and greatest. It should be more than capable of all the electric vehicles that are coming and all the, like you said, the electrification.
Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up?
I'm gonna just, go ahead. If it's a follow-up, go ahead.
Yes, are you, so obviously part of the problem with the Lowell outage was the fact that they were on the lower circuit. Are you concerned at all about the other circuits in town that have not yet been upgraded to the 16? Is that sort of in the plan, or given where they're at and, you know, kind of where they're situated, they're less concern? Because there are still others that, you know, aren't part of this upgrade plan.
Yeah, there's 3 other 4 kV circuits in the community. They are also taking a look at those. Eventually, our plan is to eventually cut them over. I don't have those dates, but we are doing a review of them as well to avoid something like this from happening again. And when we do cut the Lowell over, part of the plan is the Lowell circuit itself, we are going to use that to take some load off of the other 4 kV circuits in the meantime. So the community in the canyon will have the brand new circuit, and some of the other circuits, like let's just say the Times, portion of that Times will go into what was the old Lowell until we do that cutover, but that buys us a lot of room and time.
I would like to follow up with this question, what is a phase imbalance? Because what you seem to be saying is that the circuit in question was not capable of handling the use at that time because of the crazy peak in heat. But I'm not exactly sure. Is this because some part of that circuit was deficient? Is it the whole circuit? What explains that actual? Because we're getting people telling us they're having really low voltage even after it's fixed, and that didn't add up for me. I'm thinking there's got to be some reason for these issues aside from just an overuse on that circuit.
Yeah, so I'll try to describe it at a high level. So a circuit, a 4 kV circuit has 3 phases, and we refer to them as A, B, and C. So phases A, B, and C need to have the same amount of load on them, relatively the same amount. So if C has a lot more load than B, then that creates an imbalance, and if we don't shut the circuit down, we lose our protection, right? And the protection, we can't block the protection. We can't not have the protection because that protects us from, you know, having a wildfire ignite.
So all these are in the same circuit then? A, B,
Yes,
and
all
C?
these, yeah, it's one circuit. So one circuit has A, B, and C. So basically, what was happening is we were having that imbalance, and our crews were out here trying to balance it. So they were taking essentially some load from, let's just say, B and putting it on C, or vice versa, to try and get it balanced to be able.
So this is not a function of a bunch of pieces of equipment failing. This is just an issue of being overloaded and trying to find a way to work through that, workaround, basically.
Exactly, and it's really hard to keep on top of that because, you know, people buy electric cars and then that uses more power, and they might be on B phase and maybe on C phase. Some people moved out, and then that lowers the loading on that phase, and we don't really have those issues on a 16 kV circuit. That's not an issue on the 16 kV circuit. So by cutting it over to the 16 kV, we're hoping to eliminate all those issues and have a lot better reliability in that area.
Are there a lot of 4 kV circuits in the area outside of Sierra Madre?
Outside of Sierra Madre, yes.
There are? Okay. Thank you.
And one last benefit of our medical baseline program is there's an extra layer of notification to those customers, where, you know, they will get, you know, especially with PSPS, they will get an advance notification. If they don't respond to that notification, they'll get a phone call. And then ultimately, if they still don't respond and we're still, they will get a door knock, just to make sure that everything's okay with them.
So that'd be great if you could follow up with that, because our senior commission and our senior programming would obviously want this, not just seniors, but I think that they tend to be the most vulnerable during these situations. So if you could follow up with City Manager Reynoso and we can get some information out to our public, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's it. Thank you so much for your time and
Well,
for
thank you, and you
such-
have a good rest of your evening. And you have my contact information. Any questions or concerns, please reach out.
Will do. Thank you.
you.
Okay, that brings us to our consent agenda. Madam City Clerk, would you like to do the honors?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before the City Council this evening, there are 8 items for consideration on the consent calendar. Consent item A is Resolution 22-66, approving certain demands. And it is recommended that the City Council approve Resolution 22-66. This is for the approval of payment of city warrants in the aggregate amount of $260,189.64. Additionally, Sierra Madre Library warrants in the aggregate amount of $724.40. And lastly, payroll transfer in the aggregate amount of $435,901.16 for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2023. Consent item B is the cancellation of both the November 22nd, 2022 and also the December 27, 2022 City Council meetings. And is recommended that the City Council approve the cancellation of both of these meetings and direct staff to pay all necessary expenses during that time. Consent item C is the AB 1600 Annual Compliance Report for fiscal year 2021 through 2022. It is recommended that the City Council receive and file this report. Consent item D is the Water Treatment Granular Activated Carbon, also known as GAC, replacement agreement, and it is recommended that the City Council award a contract in the amount of $155,000 to Carbon Activated Corporation for the replacement of virgin carbon in the lead GAC treatment vessels to be completed in fiscal year 2022 to 2023. Consent item E is second reading of ordinance 1463, that's amending title 15.24 of the Sierra Madre Municipal Code relating to the adoption and amendments to the 2022 California Fire Code and fire sprinkler requirements. And it is recommended the City Council approve for second reading by title only ordinance number 1463. F is the second reading of ordinance 1464, amending the municipal code to adopt by reference the 2022 Building Code Standards codes with certain exceptions, modifications, and additions. And it is recommended that the City Council introduce and approve for second reading by title only ordinance number 1464. Item G is the second reading of ordinance 1457, amending chapter 8.06, smoking of title 8, health and safety of the Sierra Madre Municipal Code, prohibiting smoking in multi-unit residences. It is recommended that the City Council approve for second reading by title only, recommending adoption of ordinance number 1457, prohibiting smoking in multi-unit residences. And lastly, consent item H is the award of a 4-year sidewalk repair agreement with Precision Concrete Cutting. And it is recommended that the City Council award a 4-year sidewalk lip repair program to include a new assessment in the 4th year of the program with Precision Concrete in an amount not to exceed $240,000. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That concludes my report.
You made it. Thank you, Madam City Clerk.
That was a tongue twister.
It was. So I'm just gonna go down, from top to bottom, one at a time, see if there are questions. A, B, C.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
so I had a question about not so much the report itself, which I understand is, required by law, but I was just wondering in general about the use of funds that are generated by these various fees and assessments, and if there are limitations on our use. I did notice that in many of the, categories, you know, there wasn't, any projects budgeted for, this fiscal year for use of those funds, and I just wondered if that was, you know, given how many projects we have that, you know, are in need of funds, if that is because of the limitation on the use of funds and them needing to be, somehow related to the nature of the revenue.
That's correct, Councilmember Krebs. Each fund is limited, and so we can only, for example, use funds related to the Quimby Act, which is the one for parks, for park-related or recreational services. So there are limits under state law as to what those funds can be used for, and they're segregated for that reason.
On that note, so I noticed that, for example, there were no projects scheduled with respect to the water fund. And I noticed on the same consent calendar, we do have, you know, a contract relating to the water system with the GAC replacement. So wondering if there's further limitations on what types of projects this money can be used for, or if that's something that we could explore in terms of some of the water-related expenditures that we're expending all the time.
Thank you, Councilmember Krebs. And for the GAC, that is a ongoing maintenance, and these fees would be more for infrastructure. So if it's, we could look to see if there's an infrastructure project that we can apply these fees to. But for this instance, for the GAC, it would not apply.
So for example, if we were to like replace the GAC system, not just, you know, replace the carbon filters inside, but actually like upgrade or change the system itself, that would be a capital project that, you know, these funds could be used for.
That or expand our pump house or expand capacity in our distribution system to meet new growth in the system, yes.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Just following up on that, so these funds are basically the development impact funds, and they're from new development, and it appears from the report that there are only 4 increased demands upon new development. Can we use them for increased demands overall, or does it really have to be subject to increased demands from some kind of new development or one new house or whatever it might be?
I can address it on the water side. So it would increase reliability overall for new development and for existing development. So in the event we had a new development, old water mains, we could, in those areas, install new water mains or replace old water mains in other areas that would increase reliability in the system overall. I'm not sure if that answers.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of, I think Suffolk, we have that new, the new townhouses that are being built. I'm assuming we received impact fees or are gonna receive impact fees for those. Let's say that water main could be replaced. Could some of those funds, for instance, go to Suffolk because there's something being built on Suffolk?
If we have a water main project going on during that time, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, to clarify, we can't use the funds to subsidize existing services. So there has to be a tie to the new development. Most of the time with infrastructural improvements, that tie is pretty easy to make because it's okay to have incidental benefits to the city at large so long as that specific development is also being benefited through the infrastructural improvement.
Thank you for the clarification. That's what I was trying to get at. Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
So for example, we're using some of the Quimby funds to pay for the playground equipment at Sierra Vista Park. The idea being that because we have new development and new families that will use that facility, that we can put in upgraded playground equipment, even though obviously it's going to be enjoyed by all residents, not just new residents.
Exactly.
Item D. Item E. Item F. Item G. And item H.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I just had 2, I don't know, questions or comments on the contract. Is that the right time, or should we do that during discussion? Okay.
Questions? Yeah. Go for it.
So I noticed in the dispute resolution section, that we are agreeing that if there is to be a litigation to, you know, resolve any disputes, that we are waiving prevailing party fees? Seems to me that the more likely scenario is that the city will be suing the contractor and hopefully prevailing, and so I would think that the city would typically prefer that there either be prevailing party fees provided, or at least allow for the judge to, you know, have the discretion to award them in a particular instance. That's Article 11, Section D as in dog.
Councilmember Krebs, the existing agreement, the template that city staff is using is being updated by the city attorney's office. We're updating this template throughout the entire firm for all cities. So I'll make sure that that provision is included both in this agreement as well as our future template.
And then there's just a typo, I think, because we were piggybacking on the Carson bid process in the scope exhibit. There's a stray reference to the city of Carson, which I'm sure should be the city of Sierra Madre.
Don't let them get our money.
Or get the work get the work done in Carson instead of in Sierra Madre.
Any other questions? Okay, let's open this up for public comment on any item on the consent agenda.
Mr. the Mayor, the city received one email on this topic from Colette Monell, and that email was forwarded to the city council and uploaded to the city's website. There is one speaker card from Alicia Lopez.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and council members. My name is Alicia Lopez. I'm the Director of Tobacco Programs with Day One, and I just wanted to say thank you for your leadership on the smoke-free multi-unit housing ordinance and for prioritizing the health of residents. It's been a pleasure working with city staff over the last year, and please think of Day One as a tobacco control resource moving forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's it.
No other cards.
That concludes public comment. Great. Bring it back to council. Is there a motion for approval of the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda with the amendments to the sidewalk contract.
Second?
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Want to take a quick break? I think, I've been asked to take a quick break. I think that's a good idea. Let's do this, come back at 7:10 and we will resume. reconvene. And
Put my name on it, please, Kelly.
so our next agenda item is a discussion of the Sierra Madre Playhouse funding request. And so I'd like staff to come up, make a presentation. When staff is finished, I'd like Mr. David Gordon to come up and make an appeal as well.
Mayor, Community Services Manager Rebecca Silva Barron will be presenting today.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, City Council, and community. Staff recommendations. It is recommended that the City Council provide staff with direction. Alternatives. Number 1, the City Council may choose to grant the funds by approving an appropriation from the general fund. The City Council should make the appropriation via resolution to memorialize the findings required to avoid a claim of a gift of public funds. Number 2, direct staff to return to a future meeting with additional information. And number 3, direct staff to not allocate supplemental funding at this time. The Playhouse opened as a theater in February 1924 and will be approaching its centennial next year. As such, the City of Sierra Madre has supported the Playhouse with capital resources for the upkeep of the building facade and waiving nonprofit fees for production events. In an effort to continue its operations, City Council has received an appeal on behalf of the Board of Trustees of the Sierra Madre Playhouse with their capital campaign endeavor to seek continued financial support from the city for its renovations. Such enhancements will serve to modernize and improve safety and accessibility while remaining committed to its preservation as a gathering place in the community. So as the city has taken into consideration the value of community beautification, funding allocations have been issued to the Sierra Madre Playhouse in the course of the past 3 fiscal years, 2019 through 2021, totaling $88,602. This has been a combined total ranging for items such as the restoration of the marquee, a CDBG small business grant, federal funding, and nonprofit grant under the ARPA funds. Its appeal to the City Council. The capital campaign goal and the need for continued funding, in addition to the renovation schedules and estimates, are within the Playhouse's appeal to the Sierra Madre City Council. The goal is to increase the Playhouse's functionality, safety, accessibility, and enjoyment. The needs entering into its 100th year include major structural, mechanical, plumbing, and wiring renovations to ensure it is safe. This includes heat, ventilation, and air conditioning, air handling and filtration, which is important to the health of visitors, new electrical, much of the wiring is archaic, a new roof, internal and external painting, repainting, ADA compliant male and female restrooms, and wheelchair accessible entrance doors. Furthermore, as part of the renovation, the lobby will be widened and enhanced to make the Playhouse a much more attractive venue for live productions and a new space for community events. The City Appeal. A city grant of $350,000 will contribute toward Phase 2 of the rehabilitation. A number of donors have already contributed funds, including $50,000 from a resident for ADA restroom improvements. Review of funding. Now, I'll do my best to unpack this as it's a great deal of information, and so I may subtly look over to our senior counsel if needed. For the gift of public funds, Section 6, Article 16 of the California Constitution prohibits a gift of public funds. In determining whether an expenditure of public funds is a gift, there are 2 primary questions to be considered. Whether the funds are to be used for a public or a private purpose, and secondly, whether the funds are to be used for a public purpose of the agency making the expenditure. If the funds are used for a public purpose of the city making the expenditure, they are not a gift, even if there are incidental benefits to private individuals. The Sierra Madre Playhouse is a private nonprofit corporation. If the City Council desires to grant funds, it should make findings to avoid any claim that the funds are an unlawful gift. Art and Public Places Fund. The monies held in the Art and Public Places Fund cannot be used for this grant request. Sierra Madre Municipal Code 17.90.070B states, "This fund shall be maintained by the city and shall be used solely for the intent and purpose stated in section 17.90.101. The Municipal Code 17.90.010 states, "The Art and Public Places program will achieve this purpose through the collection and exhibition of high-quality, stylistically diverse art pieces, the chronicling of local history through collection of artifacts, documents, and memorabilia, and the creation of programs and activities offering artistic opportunities." It's clear from the articulated purpose of the ordinance that the funds can only be used for physical art pieces. The Playhouse is requesting funds for the HVAC, re-roofing, ADA compliant bathrooms, etc. These infrastructural improvements then do not qualify. Next, we have the general fund appropriation. The City Council may choose to grant the funds by approving an appropriation from the general fund. An appropriation should be made via resolution to memorialize the findings required to avoid a claim of a gift of public funds. Public bidding and prevailing wage. Public bidding and prevailing wages are required for all public works. A public work is defined differently in the public bidding context. Public Contract Code, sections 1101, 20161, and 22001, than in the prevailing wage context, Labor Code 1720. In short, if the city grants funds to the Sierra Madre Playhouse, the Playhouse will not be required to solicit public bids, but may be required to pay the prevailing wages. Labor Code Section 1720 includes Subdivision A and B. Subdivision A states, as used in this chapter, public works means all the following: construction, alteration, demolition, installation, or repair work done under contract and paid for or in whole or in part of out of public funds. The Labor Code Section B states that for purposes of this section, paid for in whole or in part out of public funds means all of the following: the payment of money or the equivalent of money by the state or political subdivision directly to or on behalf of the public works contractor, subcontractor, or developer. Here, the Sierra Madre Playhouse would be the developer requesting that the city pay for part of the cost of the construction, which may convert the project into a public work for purposes of prevailing wage, making the project more expensive. Before appropriating any funds, the city may consider requesting a public works coverage determination from the Department of Industrial Relations to confirm whether this project would be subject to prevailing wage. Financial review and source of funding. The fiscal impact depends on the council's decision. If the council elects to create a grant program, city staff will need to reprioritize capital projects and/or one-time department expenditures. The city council may choose to grant the funds by approving an appropriation from the general fund. The city council should also make the appropriation via resolution to memorialize the findings required to avoid a claim of a gift of public funds. Additionally, and a very critical component as well, is that any funds granted will be subject to grant reporting requirements, as is the current practice of other funding agencies, be it at the city level, state, or federal. As such, it is beneficial for the city to equally implement this practice. And for example, that can be composed by quarterly or biannual funding reports, description of expenditures and the respective vendors, and/or progress photos. Staff time was also incurred in the preparation of the report. And that concludes the report. At this time, we will happily take any questions.
Thank you, Community Services Manager Silva. I'd like to, if I could hold off on questions, I would like to get Sierra Madre Playhouse President David Gordon to come up and make a presentation. Then I would like to be able to submit questions to both staff and to Mr. Gordon.
Good evening, and thank you for giving me the opportunity, Mayor Goss, Mayor Pro Tem Garcia, and Council Members Arizmendi and Krebs. And I'm sorry that Mr. Parkhurst is not able to hear this. So I regard you as my fellow citizens and fellow volunteers. And I think we're all in this together. I'd like to make that point right at the beginning. On December the 15th, 2021, at the height of the pandemic, the Playhouse was full of people who came to see a performance of It's a Wonderful Life. During the height of the pandemic, it brought people together, a wonderful life-affirming experience at a time when things were looking really bleak. And it's only the Playhouse in Sierra Madre that can offer the opportunity for people of diverse people, all kinds of creeds, religions, political views, to come together for that sort of experience. I moved to Sierra Madre in 2013 and went to the Playhouse soon afterwards and was amazed, absolutely amazed by the quality of the performance, and did something unusual. I sent them a check, and very rapidly they asked me to become a volunteer, and I fell for it. And I've been president of the board since 2017. So what is the Sierra Madre Playhouse as a legal entity? It is a tax-exempt 501c3. Tax-exempt in a sense, but we do actually pay sales and property taxes. We are obliged to pay $6,000 a year to the county in property taxes because under some kind of criterion, we are not exempt from all taxes, unlike some other not-for-profits. We're tax exempt in the sense that should we make a profit, if only, we would then be exempt from paying tax on that profit. So we're an organization regarded by the IRS as an organization devoted to the public good. I'm a trustee. Trustees are not paid, quite the reverse. Trustees are expected not only to give of their time, but also to give money. Sierra Madre Playhouse is one of the very few small theatre companies that actually owns its own building. Most of them are in rented accommodation. So anything we put into the building, it's there for us. The staff paper talks about the difference between private and public. Well, in a sense, we're both or neither. We are a not-for-profit. Like the library, we provide a unique service to the community. Now, this theatre, which is owned effectively on behalf of the community, badly needs refurbishment. Restoration of the Playhouse started recently with the marquee in 2020, and we thank the city for its contribution of $13,000 towards that cost. My late wife Maggie and I donated the rest. An architect and a contractor have done a master plan for the complete refurbishment of the building in 4 phases. If all 4 phases are completed, this would cost $2.5 million. Phase 1 is a new roof and new wheelchair-friendly access front doors and doors into the auditorium. Work is being done on the roof right now, and we hope that the work will be completed this weekend. The doors will arrive soon. They are designed to enhance its 1940s experience. We've taken advice from historic architects on what they should look like. Anyway, the cost of the roof and the doors is $70,000. This is all being met from the Playhouse's limited resources, but that means our resources are then exhausted. And that means that we're appealing to you for phase 2, which is the most urgent. ADA compliant bathrooms, replacement of the 60-year-old electrical system, and modern epidemic coping, air handling and air conditioning. Phase 3 would be to enlarge the lobby and make it a much better gathering space for the community, for meetings and debates and receptions. And Sierra Madre is not well endowed with places like that. Phase 4 would be to make technical upgrades and to use the upper floor for a rehearsal space. So we're in the quiet phase of a campaign. So we have not gone public on this campaign. If we'd gone public on the campaign, this room would be full of people wearing bright Sierra Madre Playhouse t-shirts. But we haven't gone that route, not yet. So we are hoping that the rest of the money will come in large part from government, starting with the city. We are talking to the county, we're talking to the state, and talking to federal government in the form of Judy Chu. So we're beginning with the city with a request to help the funding of phase 2. It's a prerequisite for getting money from other government sources and private sources. If the city does not support this campaign, others will see a reason not to. So we're requesting $350,000 towards the urgent phase 2 to make the building wheelchair accessible, electrically secure, and its air safe to breathe. If a special needs visitor needs to use a restroom now, very embarrassing, we have to wheel them across to the only place in town to use the restrooms there. Pandemic audiences care about air quality. A major cause of fires is old electrical systems. And basically we have to upgrade the whole thing. During COVID, people have got used to the idea of not going out. Habits have changed. You go to restaurants, but to go to the theater, all the theaters in Los Angeles, all over the country, are suffering a loss of audience as people have fundamentally changed their attitudes, which coincided with this explosion in streaming services. So once you've paid your money for the month, the marginal cost of going out, marginal cost being a phrase that economists like Ed and I understand, the marginal cost is zero. So $550,000 is the total cost of phase 2, we think, and this is outside the means of the Playhouse. And we're not asking for all of it, because a major contribution by the city would kickstart a campaign which then is much more likely to succeed once they see that the city is behind it. The downside of not getting the money is that we would seriously have to consider closing the Playhouse. It's simply not fit for purpose. And the old electrical system, the air conditioning, lack of ADA bathrooms means that we're not able to provide service to the public and would have to consider closing. Now, speakers in public comment and the many letters that have been sent to the Playhouse emphasize the benefits of a Playhouse fit for purpose. But I'm going to concentrate for the rest of my brief presentation. I'm not using slides. If I did use slides, I would ask Southern California Edison to tell me their designer so that I could do the kind of slides that really drive people crazy. But I'm not going to do that to you. So if you're as city council, what are the things that concern you? And so I'm going to list 4 or 5 of them and try and deal with them. The first of those is the city doesn't own the building. We own the library, we don't own the playhouse. Why should we put money into it? Well, I think the reason is because although you don't own the building is owned in trust for the community, and it benefits the city just in the same way, in the same unique way that the library does. Second, a point referenced in the staff paper, the city is helping a private organization. I think I've dealt with that. We're not really private in the sense of being a corporation or an individual. We're private but dedicated to a unique public benefit for the people of Sierra Madre. And the contribution that the city has already made to the marquee shows that there is a legal way for city funds to be given to the playhouse. By the way, if we did if we were called a public body, we'd be happy to use prevailing wage rates. We're not trying to do this at the expense of using cheap labor, which is sort of raised in the staff paper. Third question, does this set a precedent for other capital requests? Well, if the precedent is to support a theatre, I think you're pretty safe that we're the only people who would apply. Is it a precedent to help not-for-profits? Well, quite frankly, if a not-profit comes to the council with an unusual request that seems to be justifiable, then in that sense it would be a precedent, but not necessarily a bad one. And I think one ought to measure how unique the playhouse is from an economic point of view. If you imagine a playhouse that's safe and welcoming, under our new artistic policy of trying to fill the playhouse more often, we could consider having 100 performances a year. If they were filled, that would bring 10,000 people into the city, coming to our restaurants and bars and stores. And they come from all over the region. Only about a third of the people who in a typical audience are from Sierra Madre. We're bringing people in. Another objection might be the role of city government is limited to public safety and water. Well, 6 years ago, the people of Sierra Madre voted to raise their own taxes to save the city they love, the parks, the library, the 4th of July parade, along with police and fire. This city cares about quality of life, and we care about the city. And that's why we use our marquee as a beacon of hope on the boulevard during COVID. Finally, the city can't afford it. Well, let's look at the latest audited statements for the period to June 2021. I am a qualified accountant in England. I'm not a CPA. I haven't passed that test, but I understand balance sheets. And amazingly, during COVID, the city's financial health improved. Reserves actually rose by $3 million before to $10 million. And of that $10 million, the city sets aside 25% of operating costs as a designated reserve, and the rest is undesignated. That amounts to $6.7 million as of the end of 2021. Cash in the bank and investments rose by $8 million to $31 million. Debt is incredibly low for a municipality. Pension obligations are probably better funded than just about any other municipality in California. The city has been extremely well run. You and your predecessors can take the credit for that. And arguably, zero-based budgeting has been too successful. The city has been running surpluses and build up reserves and has not spent enough. So it's very welcoming to see that that is to change in the budget for 22-23. There is room both to buy a new building for the police and to spend a relatively small amount of money on the playhouse. Don't you agree, Jose? You do agree, don't you? So the arguments in favor of collaborating with the playhouse are overwhelming. City support would be a stepping stone for county, state and federal money. The needs of the playhouse are urgent. if we cannot rewire, re-bathroom and re-air, we might well have to padlock this building, which we've now made waterproof. The benefits to the community are very great. Few communities can boast of having their own live theatre. We play a key role in education. 800 kids came to see Silent Sky from the Pasadena United School District, and another 100 from Alverno. That's almost as many kids who came to see the play as other audiences. And also we put on we put on 4 lectures about astronomy, completely free, during the run of the play. And the Playhouse brings in people from all over the region who have a meal, patronize our stores, and spend money. Also, the Playhouse, like the library, is a purple place where Red America and Blue America can come together and find common ground, increasingly important in this polarized country of ours. I'm an American citizen now. We celebrate our centenary as a place of entertainment in February of 2024. So please collaborate with us, be our partners, to ensure it remains the distinctive icon of the city, fit for the next century. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. So I'd like to, if you'd be so kind, I'd like to maybe grab a seat in the front. We will have some questions for Community Services Manager Silva, and you might field some yourself as well. So who would like to start? Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I'm the only one with questions.
Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Well, let me just throw something out. You're not renting, you own. So if you didn't own this building, what would the rent be for that facility?
I should think it would. If we were renting the building, it would be at least $1,000 a year, $1,000 a week, nearly $50,000 a year at least.
I would think, yeah, at least that, maybe more.
At
right?
least.
If the building were up to code and ready to go,
Yeah.
tip-top shape.
Yeah. In fact, based on our new rental regime, it's more like $3,000 a week.
3,000, okay. Thank you. Other questions?
Yeah, I just, we have the finance director here, and I just want, if she could address some of the comments made by Mr. Gordon. I just like to hear what our fund balance, if you have it with you, our fund balances are currently, especially after us purchasing the Bank of America building. And I know the answer to some of these questions, but I think it's good for the public to hear some of these things. And also, if we're thinking about our budget, and we all saw the budget when we approved it, what the surplus, we do have a surplus in our budget, not a deficit, but what that is and what it was in the preceding years.
Good evening. So I don't have the numbers with me, but I do know that the projected reserves in the general fund are about 63% of expenditures. And our policy is 25% of expenditures, and that's an emergency reserve. And I was preparing a staff report for general fund reserves. A lot of agencies have that minimum, 25%, but they also have other buckets assigned. We do not have it designated, as mentioned, but we are coming and working on a report because there's certain items like pension and interest rates that are projections are not coming as projected for PERS, so that's going to affect our budget coming forward.
Yeah, so I do.
Mayor Pro Tem, may I add, there's GFOA, which recommends a 25% reserve.
And that's our minimum.
That's our minimum. We also have the California State Auditor's Office that ranks cities' financial risk And the rank is for cities that have 50 to 75% reserves. Currently, we're in the low risk with 63% of our reserves to cover our operating expense. So those are the two qualifying criteria. One is from GFOA and one is from the state auditor's office.
And at 63% is our current reserves after we spent the money on that building?
That is correct.
Mr. City Manager, is there a fiscal impact associated with that rating? I mean, I know, I'm thinking of like a credit rating, which, you know, if you have a worse credit rating, you could, you know, be charged higher interest rates, and is there a fiscal impact associated with those risks or with those ratings, or is it just a matter of, you know, sort of wanting the city to be at a low risk rating?
That's a question that I'll defer to the finance director.
Yeah, so the state auditor performs an assessment of cities, and in different factors they rate them. One of the factors is general fund reserves, and the low risk the designation as city manager, it was between 50 to 75% of operating would be low risk. The assessment, when the state auditor notices that if they're a high risk city, they might conduct audits and issue their own statements. So that's why they do the assessment in the first place.
Thank you. And, you know, I just want to preface this that I have great conversations with Mr. Gordon. I'm not trying to rain on everyone's parade here. I think it's in the public interest to get the finances out there in the public realm so we can talk about it. And I'll just say that our projected surplus for the general fund is $45,000 this year. Last year, we had 2.1 million. And in previous years, we had surpluses in the millions. And I know you've spoken on this before, we had fund balances that we could work on rather than using our general fund. So we could work down fund balances for different portions of our city operations. And that's why we're able to have these large reserves and then, large surpluses, which then turn into reserves in the next year because balance sheet issues, right? So if you could explain for everybody's edification kind of what I just explained and what that had been over the past couple of years, I think that would be helpful.
Yes, you are correct, and you explained it very well. The 2 million surplus last year was because of budgeting using existing reserves, and that's why in this fiscal year we didn't have that large surplus budgeted because that was like a one-time item. And we also purchased the B of A building, and there's improvements to be made on that building.
I think I just have a couple more questions. And one of them has to do with, let's talk about the library a little bit. I think we would have been budgeting about $500,000 for the library for infrastructure repair, and this might not be for you, I'm sorry, Director. But it's my understanding that we budgeted those funds, and those are already spent with our parking lot improvement and those types of things. So if somebody could speak to that, because obviously if we got the $10 million and we don't need to spend it, that frees up monies to be spent elsewhere. But I want to make sure that that's a fact or not a fact.
Mayor Pro Tem, I believe this year we budgeted, and Director Semino can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it was $480,000 for library improvements. I think the contract came in around $360,000 to $380,000, so I think that there was about $80,000 left in budget expenditures for the library this year. But we have the improvements, the ADA improvements and the improvements to the parking, that contract, I believe, and the exterior improvements that we made, that totaled about just under $400,000.
Can I follow that? Weren't we planning before the allocation came from the state? Weren't we planning for another allocation next year for continued renovation of the library? Those have not been expended, right?
That is correct. We were also contemplating a accessory building for the Friends of the Library on the outside of the building.
How much is that? Was that another?
I believe the total was about $1 million investment that we're looking to make there.
Right.
Thinking about water infrastructure, you know, we talked about our pump house in the we had a fire in the pump house, and that was what, 10 years ago? Have we repaired that yet?
That has not been repaired. The pump house is in need of a complete renovation, including all the electrical components.
I don't want to keep on this, but just a couple questions. Thank you.
Other questions?
I have a question for Director Silva. So I noticed at the end of the staff report about the fiscal impact, talked about, you know, if the city council elected to create a grant program, that there would need to be a reprioritization of capital projects. And it wasn't clear to me from the rest of the report what the grant program would be. I don't know if that was just a miswording, or whether there was something else that was being considered in terms of that. I mean, I guess when I think of grant program, I think of, for example, the nonprofit grants that we set up, you know, with some of our federal funding. I don't know if that was just in that realm, or whether there was something else that was under consideration.
So in any of the previous funding programs that we've worked with, whether it's been, for example, the County of LA Regional Parks and Open Space District, or Proposition State type of grants, their procedural guide does require that there be grant reporting involved. So whatever that will look like for the city, if it's something that we resemble like the previous grant application, for example, that was implemented for the ARPA funds, or anything else that needs to be implemented to formalize that process, that we should state that requirement specifically, that you know, verification of funds that are being expended are provided in the form of, or it could be a quarterly report, a biannual report. It could be progress photos of how, you know, these specific areas of improvement are being completed. And so that was very important in speaking with our city manager and our finance director as well, as our senior counsel, to make sure that we would implement that component.
No, I was just saying, and that would be the case even if we were expending our own funds, and not sort of, you know, administering a distribution of funds from outside sourcing.
Yes, if it's done as a grant, then that would be the requirement.
Got it. Sorry, City Attorney.
Yes. Mayor, just to highlight a point, we haven't listed the figures of what prevailing wage would mean for this project in the staff report, but the city manager and I were just running some calculations, and according to Public Works staff, a prevailing wage project causes a markup of something like 35%. So if we use that figure for a moment, if the Department of Industrial Relations, if they issue their opinion, comes back and says the entire $2.5 million project is going to be subject to a 35% markup, the number I got is $875,000 in addition to the 2.5 million project. If it's limited simply to the phase 2 project, and I believe the phase 2 project is the one for which the funds are being requested, the phase 2 project is valued at $520,000, and a 35% markup would be $182,000.
All right.
And would, I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot, maybe it's a follow-up item, but would the provision of funding from the city in any amount for maybe even a particular purpose convert the entire project into a public project requiring prevailing wages?
So just to quote the statute, it says, paid for in whole or in part out of public funds. And in order to protect the city, I think the most prudent approach would be to go to the Department of Industrial Relations and request that Public Works coverage determination for them to tell us whether or not, if in fact X amount would trigger prevailing wage, and if so, does the prevailing wage apply to a specific phase or to the entire project as a whole, the $2.5 million project?
And if I can just interject and just with experience, in my experience, if you can establish specific tasks or projects that can be covered with the government funding, you can differentiate it from the entire phase, but that's always the question is, can you really justify and document that the government funds only covered tasks of X, Y, and Z? So, to be prudent, you may want to ask, but you know, let's say hypothetically in this example here, you really can just say and it's just the ADA bathrooms. You may be able to differentiate which was federally funded and may not be applicable to the entire project.
Yeah, so I'm currently working on my professional life, a prevailing wage case, and it's about, actually, the wages are about double in this case. They were tile layers, but I know we're not in discussion yet. We're still in the question phase, so I don't want to get too deep. But I just want to say that that's just the labor. You know, what Mr. Gordon's bringing in front of us would also have supplies, and the supplies isn't prevailing wage, so it's not really fair to gross up the whole project because it's only labor, and part of it is supplies, right? So, Mr. Gordon, may I ask a couple questions? So I agree. Phase 1 and Phase 2 are like, they need to be done. Those are the two necessary to keep you going, right? And you know, scratch out the numbers. At your estimates, that's about 60% of Phase 1 and Phase 2 would be funded by the city if we were to grant the whole thing. My question is, like, kind of going forward, and I know you're really big on being open to people of all economic backgrounds. But I'm thinking of the future phases. Could that not be done through some type of pricing structure where you can increase your revenue somehow, or is, you know, you've studied economics as well. When you increase prices, what happens to the amount of people that are in the seats? That becomes an issue. So has that model been explored to see if you could fund the other two phases through some kind of pricing mechanism rather than through raising funds?
If only. As it is, we have been badly affected by AB 5, and our labor costs have gone up by 50%. So we're struggling, even with the revenue that we generate, to cover the direct production costs. So all our overhead expenses have to be met by donations and grants and appeals. So our capacity for raising money by increasing prices is very low. You'll notice at the moment most of the theaters around Los Angeles are offering discounted tickets. So the idea of being able to charge more is not on the cards at the moment.
I seem to recollect Senator Portantino talking about some type of reprieve from AB 5 for you. Is that in the, I don't know, is that in the works, or is that done, or how does that help?
It's in the works. It's been approved in principle, but it's stuck in the appropriations department and need to get the money to pay for it. And so it's not certain yet whether the money will be available. If that is available, it would certainly help us, but not enough for us to be able to put our prices. There's a kind of market price for the theater. We try to price ourselves a little below, but there's not much we can charge in addition.
And I'm assuming because of AB 5 and all this, when you do these community outreach, 900 students coming through, which is wonderful, you still have to pay the actors and production.
Oh,
and
yes,
all
yes.
that.
No, we've applied for a grant from a foundation, which we're hoping to get to pay, in retrospect, for the money we've already spent. It cost us an extra $20,000 to do that because we had to have a double cast, both for COVID and also because the actors are not free during the week for the matinee, so we had to have a double cast to cope with the extra performances for schools.
Thank you.
Other questions? I think we have exhausted our questions. Thank you, Mr. Gordon. Thank you, Community Service Manager Silva. I'd like to open this up to public comment. Please limit your remarks to 3 minutes. We would prefer that you fill out a yellow participation card before you come up.
Mr. Mayor, we have received 6 emails from the public on this, and those emails were forwarded to the City Council for review and consideration. The first speaker card that we have for this evening is for Olivia O'Neill.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. Really appreciate it. I'm here because I've been a part of the Sierra Madre community and Playhouse. I'm a native here, but I've been a student and also an employee and then volunteer since 1999. I started at Allison Kalmus's acting classes. I was about 8 years old. And then I also continued with musical theater as well as performance arts in high school. And then after that, I graduated and went to Loyola Marymount University. And then after I went to LMU, I returned and worked with Christian Labano and also Allison as a house manager, props, and then just a performer. It's a very important part of Sierra Madre. It's important to a lot of people, and as our president mentioned, it's like kind of like it has a symbiotic relationship to a lot of businesses, and it's just a place for myself as well as many students and everybody in the community to go to and kind of forget about life and enjoy life, and it's a really special place. And even during COVID, we got very creative and did it outside for us to do a classic Charlie Brown, which was really, really special to be able to be a part of that. And yeah, it's always been a special place to go to, and just even when you're not at the theater, you can promote it at other businesses, spread the word. And as the president also said, it's brought in so many people from out of state, from other schools, and it's amazing. I even had an audition last week, and I mentioned Sierra Madre, and they were like, "Oh, I love that place." And it's been a place to film, to shoot many projects, whether it's theater, whether it's film. It's a very special, unique theater, and everyone that's come here has always talked about it in Burbank, Pasadena, even Beverly Hills and Century City. So it's a very widespread establishment. Many people know of it and they want to come back, and I've made many friends, many partnerships here. And yeah, it deserves a chance to be, resurrected and illuminated and worked on. It deserves it very much so. Yeah, I implore you to consider helping out the Sierra Madre Playhouse. It's a really special place. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, the next speaker is Leslie Ziff.
Mr. Mayor and Council, I'm here with 2 hats on tonight. My first hat is with the Historical Society because I am the co-president. I want to reiterate what has been said by Mr. Gordon. This is a treasure that our city has. It is a historical playhouse. It is something that goes right along with our museums and our landmark homes. This is something that we need to treasure. And I just really do not want you to forget that we have such a great community with this history, and we need to keep it going. It is part of what we need to do as the community to help strengthen institutions like the Playhouse. My other hat is because my education is in vocal music, musical theater. I'm a director, and this is my love. And to know, because I have taught at the junior high and the high school and the college levels now, I know how important it is for children and for students along with the adults and all of us old people, to be entertained and to know and how to understand what a performance is, not only on stage, but how to be an audience. And with this little theater, this is so important that people can learn how to be an audience and how to be respectful. And these are all things that are learned through community theater and the support of a community. So these are things that I want you to remember. I know that because they are asking for grants at the state and national levels, that they need to, the grant people need to see that it is also being supported by the city. And that is like one of the steps that they have to meet before they can apply to other grants. So it's important that we put our best foot forward on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Ziff.
Mr. Mayor, Rich Proctor is the next speaker.
Good evening. I want you to imagine something. I want you to imagine the Sierra Madre Playhouse doesn't exist, and somebody were to come before you and they were to say, I would like to create a performing arts center for the city of Sierra Madre. It's going to be adjacent to the Central Business District. It's going to be a place where citizens of Sierra Madre could gather to enjoy plays, film festivals, music performances, town halls, celebrations, lectures, library events. This is a place where it's going to have hundreds of events. It's going to provide unforgettable experiences to people. Theater is the only art where the artist and the audience exist in the same place, and there can be, in the best circumstances, I have no doubt that all of you have experienced this, you have life-changing moments. And this is something that your community can enjoy. If somebody were to come to you and say that, what would your reaction be? I think you'd probably say that's something our community could really use and could really need. Something extraordinary happened last December. I was part of it. The Playhouse did 4 performances of It's a Wonderful Life, the movie, and they sold out all 4 performances. And what was really extraordinary about this is It's a Wonderful Life may be the most available movie in the world. You know, every streaming service has it because it's public domain. It's the easiest thing in the world to sit in your own living room and open up an iPad and watch it. But 400 people over 4 nights gathered in the Sierra Madre Playhouse because people have a need to come together to experience emotional storytelling together because there's nothing else like it. You know, this is, and there's only one of these in Sierra Madre. And so the proper way to think about this is that this isn't some kind of charity request or something like that. This is an opportunity to invest in the cultural and civic life of Sierra Madre. And it can be, it's an indispensable part of the city. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Proctor.
Mr. Mayor, Alex Bielansky.
Sure. Hello, how is everyone doing tonight? Thank you for letting me, giving me a chance to speak. My name is Alex Bielansky. I am a senior at California School of the Arts, San Gabriel Valley. I was also a former Rose Parade princess, and I walked in the 4th of July parade with the Sierra Madre Playhouse. I have been an actor since I was 6 years old. I've been acting since for as long as I can remember, and the Sierra Madre Playhouse is another great way to display that acting career. And once a year at my school, we do a performance at the Sierra Madre Playhouse. It's an amazing thing, and I'm always excited for it because I get to just go see my friends just right up the street, and it's just an amazing experience. And if you take that away, I don't even know where we're gonna have those performances anymore. And I'm also a part of the teen council, and they've actually helped me discover what I want to be doing with my life and my future career. I'm really interested in stage management, and before I moved to Sierra Madre 3 years ago, I really didn't know anything about stage management, and now I've discovered something that's really been a passion for me. So if you help the Sierra Madre Playhouse, you're helping other kids discover the arts and help them. And yes, they're giving them free performances as well, but you're also helping kids perform. We recently did a production of it's a curious incident of the dog of the nighttime, which was all about autism and spreading awareness, and it was an amazing and powerful show. I cried a lot because I was recently diagnosed with autism, and it was something that meant a lot to me. And all the other performances, we had one cut short because of the pandemic, and then we had Little Women, which was also incorporated adult actors from the Playhouse, including with our youth actors, and it was an amazing show, and it's something I'm always going to remember about this city. And like I said, I'm very active in the city. I was the Rose Parade Princess. I spoke to you last year around this time regarding that, and it's just been something that I've loved, and it's just a great opportunity for the city. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Allison Kalmus.
Good evening, gentle folk. My grandfather in 1920 opened a storefront here on Sierra Madre Boulevard called Sierra Aircraft, and went on to build an aerodrome, as they called it, over where the Hastings Ranch shopping center is right now. And he hosted Amelia Earhart and a number of very, very significant pilots there for their air rodeos, as they called them. So in 2001, when Sierra Madre Playhouse came to me to ask me if I would start a children's theater program there, because I am a teacher and involved in theater, I was thrilled. Coming home to do this was an amazing experience, and through the years we started with an acting program. We moved it into Shakespeare and repertory theater and improvisation and storytelling, and the program grew and grew. And we, as we went along, I started mainstreaming special needs children into the project. So we have brought in children on the autism spectrum, ADHD, dyslexia, Tourette's, children suffering from depression, anxiety. We had one girl with cystic fibrosis, because musical theater, of course, involves singing, and if you know about cystic fibrosis, the therapy, the lung therapy and singing is very important. We've partnered with the city. Sierra Madre has. We've helped with our Shakespeare in the Park. We did 5 years of that with the city helping over in the park, and offered it free. The Playhouse helped produce that. The city gave us the facilities free for the community. La Crescenta and La Cañada asked, they came and saw it and wanted us to come in and do it. So we went in and did it for them, but we charged them. One of the most important things of this program, one of my very special parts of it, there's so many, is that we have a TA program. And from that, we bring and call students who have shown passion, responsibility, and dedication to help. And we brought them in as TAs, as student directors, as assistants. They've helped all these students, including our mainstream special needs students. And I would like to bring up Kiyomi Wu Inoue. She is one of our current TAs, and have her speak a little bit, if she can, for just a minute or so.
She can have 3 minutes.
Oh, she can have a whole 3 minutes? I don't think she's going to be, she knows how to get off the stage quickly, so come on in, Kiyomi. Momo is what we call her.
Good evening. My name is Kiyomi Wu Inoue, and actually before I came to the Sierra Madre Playhouse, I had severe social shyness. So you know how it goes. You get up in front of the class to do a presentation, and you just completely freeze. Like, you don't know what to say. You just stand there. It's happened to me way too many times, and it really was a huge impact on me and like my grades. And then I enrolled into Allison Kalmus's theater program, AKT, at the Sierra Madre Playhouse. And over the years, it's helped me overcome challenges of public speaking. And well, actually, I actually want to go into law now. And that is a huge part of law, right? And so it's incredible what I've been able to do because of this program. And as Mrs. Cummins has said, I've become more like a TA and a leader where I student direct and I help students, I choreograph. I do so many amazing things, and I was given that opportunity because of the Sierra Madre Playhouse. And generally, the Sierra Madre Playhouse is so big on diversity. You know, like they put on shows like Joy Luck Club and King of the Yees, which is a big representation of the Asian American culture, right? Which is, for me, right, at least, it's nice to see that because you don't get to see that everywhere. And it really pertains to me because of it represents my own culture and my own identity. And so just AKT in general and SMP, they both really embrace culture and identity instead of just being colorblind, you know. And we also help with like special needs kids, as Mrs. Cummins was saying. And so it's a wonderful, wonderful place. And honestly, I don't know where I would be without it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, the next speaker is Robbie Seidberg.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Mayor and council people. I am not a resident of Sierra Madre. I've been a resident of Pasadena and Altadena now, and got involved in the Playhouse a good number of years ago. I don't know how many, but it's been fun. It's been a lot of fun, and I guess I was drawn to the theater to become a docent because of my love of theater. And when I was a child, we didn't have community theater. And I was fortunate in that my parents took me down to New York City fairly often, and we'd see plays, and it was wonderful. And I think one of the big turning points for me, kind of always wanted to be a teacher. And when you're 10 or so, you know, that's kind of an early phase to decide you want to become a teacher. But I saw The Miracle Worker, and I think that was had a big impact on me all through the rest of my life. And I just was drawn to theater. And when I was looking for something to do after I'd stopped teaching, I am a teacher. I'm an elementary school teacher. I leaned towards towards the Sierra Madre Playhouse, and docenting there, and it's been fun. I've had an opportunity to do a lot of different things, painting public spaces and and running across the only place in town to get coffee, and welcoming people in, a whole variety of things, and it's been wonderful. But I think I guess I've used theater in my classroom a bit, not a lot, and I think it's shown me the impact that it can have for kids who do have problems, who have difficulties. I've had an opportunity to work with 2 select mutes, and these are children who can, when they're in certain situations, they'll talk freely, but when they're in other situations, they won't talk at all. And it's a challenge. So through skits and readers theater, I was able to get them to speak. I couldn't get them to speak when we were doing language arts and reading, but when it came to doing something like a skit, they would participate. They'd use props, you know, they were a different person, and it was really exciting. And I think with all the opportunities that the Playhouse offers, it needs to continue. And it needs to offer the kind of opportunities you've heard some of these other presenters say that they had there. And I don't know, it's a good place. I hope you're able to help us out. Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I apologize if I mispronounce this name, Annie Valektian? Annie? Anne Valektian? I'm not sure if this is a G. Oh, one.
I'm sorry, I didn't write better. Those are tough acts to follow. The speakers that we've had are just incredible. My late husband and I moved to Sierra Madre in 1976 with a family of 4 children. There was a lot to get to know: schools, Bailey Canyon, parks, stores, Arnold's, restaurants, the pool, the rec center, Little League. It seemed almost too good to be true. All of this, and a theater too. Both of us and our family, our children, have taken part in watching theater at the Sierra Madre Playhouse, and then our grandchildren have done the same thing. 3 of our adult children still live in Sierra Madre, and the grandchildren are in and out. One of our fondest memories has been taking the family, the children, the grandchildren, to see a wonderful production of the Fantastics at the Sierra Madre Playhouse. We all remember on our way home singing, "Try to remember, remember." Oh, they were so good. The plays that we've seen here have been really remarkable. Sierra Madre has established a good relationship, Sierra Madre Playhouse, with the neighboring communities, Arcadia, Altadena, Pasadena, from all around come to see our plays for their evenings out. You all know, of course, that there are so many varied restaurants within easy walking distance of the Playhouse: home style, ethnic restaurants, elegant restaurants. Let's encourage destination evenings around our elegant little theater. Becoming more enticing to our neighbors would be a great asset to our entire city. But most importantly and finally, let us continue to support the theater for those of us who live right here in this lovely community. This truly neighborhood theater has been a treasure of Sierra Madre for almost 100 years. Let's keep it going.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Pamela Winters.
Good evening, Mayor Goss, council members. My name is Pamela Winters, and I'm a resident of Sierra Madre for more than 25 years. I am here today reading a letter. I have her permission. I'm reading a letter sent to the council from Fran Syverson, who is in her 90s, and she's unable to be here. Otherwise, she really would be here to read this herself. It is Fran who pledged $50,000 to create the ADA compliant bathrooms. Her letter reads, "About a year ago, I started a plan with my children and grandchildren that I named my early inheritance plan. If they wanted to do some rather large project, like adding a room to their home or to replace a clunky car, but couldn't afford it yet, I could give them some of their presumed inheritance early. I could see them enjoying the pleasure of it while I was still alive. After a bit, I came to realize that the same would be true if I gave an early inheritance now to my favorite charities. I might live to see what special project they would do. Of course, the Sierra Madre Playhouse was the first thing that came to my mind. Howard and I had attended plays there ever since we moved to Sierra Madre in 1982. Soon I began writing reviews of each of the plays. It was a place dear to my heart. So I inquired, and indeed, something came to the mind to the Playhouse leaders. 2 somethings, as a matter of fact: a new roof and bathrooms adapted for handicapped persons. I didn't ponder very long. While the bathrooms sounded rather inglorious and mundane, the choice was most meaningful to me. Our second son, Mark, was born with a severe physical handicap. Reminded me of years of coping with inconvenient bathrooms. Of course, I chose ADA bathrooms. I donated money to start the needed reconstruction. Now, anyone who starts work on an old building knows that one thing leads to another. Updating has become necessary with the plumbing, electricity, cooling, and other systems, as well as the roof. I'm hoping that a grant from the city will enable the Playhouse to complete the entire project in a timely manner. In fact, I hope very much to be here to announce the dedication of the Sierra Madre Playhouse 88 bathrooms to the memory of Mark H. Syverson by Howard and Fran Syverson. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, the next speaker is Estelle Campbell.
Good evening. Thank you, Council, for taking so much time to hear our cause. You can understand that it means a great deal in so many different levels for so many different people. I live in Pasadena. I don't live in Sierra Madre, but I came to Sierra Madre back in 2009 and began volunteering at the Playhouse. And I was so just enchanted by the fact that this wonderful town reminded me so much of the Oregon Shakes festival in, why do I always forget the town?
Ashland.
Ashland, thank you. You have everything. And you know, when we come out of 2 years of COVID, I think that there's so many trends we're now reading about, what cities need to have learned from that experience. And I think Sierra Madre has pretty much all of them in place already. You know, there's the 20-minute walk that everybody can make, the outdoor experience. And the thought of losing a theater is a likelihood, because I think that all of communities, I'm involved in cultural organizations coming together, and we all recognize kind of the existential moment. So I hope very much that I think the other comment that was made is very true, is that we really need the imprimatur of the city of Sierra Madre to go forward with some of the serious fundraising that will need to be done as we kind of grow into kind of this next phase. And I keep thinking too, you know, we've got an Olympics coming up. I wonder in 2028 what Sierra Madre is going to be, you know, bringing to all of the people that are going to come to Los Angeles. So I hope that we can keep some of these ideas in mind, and I thank you for taking the time you have to give this some real consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, the next speaker is Eileen Walker.
Greetings, Mayor Goss, council members, and members of the community. My name is Eileen Walker. I live on Ramona Avenue. I'm a nonprofit leadership consultant. I also serve on the board of the Sierra Madre Playhouse and the Sierra Madre Community Foundation. I also serve as a volunteer with the Executive Service Corps of Southern California. I speak today in favor of the Sierra Madre Playhouse and in favor of the city of Sierra Madre becoming a supporter and being one of the cornerstones of the Sierra Madre Playhouse Capital Campaign. My husband and I moved to Sierra Madre 3 years ago. Mark grew up in Arcadia, and through many visits to this area, I grew to love the San Gabriel Valley just as much as he does. When it came time for us to retire, we carefully considered our choices. Sierra Madre was choice number 1. Why was this? Because Sierra Madre has soul. We all instinctively sense this as we walk down Sierra Madre Boulevard. It is a very special place. And along with such icons as the Mount Wilson Trail, Bailey Canyon, and Mary's Market, the Sierra Madre Playhouse is an element that knits the fabric of our town together. The beautiful golden light glows from the marquee each evening. It's how you know you are home. It is part and parcel of what makes Sierra Madre such a beautiful place. Yet so easily this beauty and soul can be lost. During the past 2 years, we've all experienced sadness as so many of the places that we once took completely for granted are now shuttered. Even here in Sierra Madre, we've seen changes and losses that no one wants to see. We all sense the possibility of our community losing even more special places. Having graced the boulevard for almost 100 years, the Sierra Madre Playhouse is built of many, many items that have long since seen the end of their useful life. The building is basically cobbled together with Band-Aids and desperately needs remodeling. The exciting news is that this week a new roof is underway, and a new wheelchair-accessible entry doors are next on the agenda. But the electrical system, the heating, the air conditioning, the plumbing, all are yet to be refurbished. Unfortunately, the finances of a nonprofit theater in Los Angeles don't lend themselves to expensive capital improvements. Thus today, we humbly ask the City of Sierra Madre to be the cornerstone of our community capital campaign. With city support, the Playhouse will be able to leverage county, state, and private funds, and we can make sure that we keep the Playhouse marquee glowing, the iconic symbol of the soul of Sierra Madre. Thank you in advance for your support.
Thank you, Mrs. Walker.
Mr. Mayor, the final speaker card is for Alex Novak.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council members, City Manager, Chief Amos. I just want to lend a few words of emphatic words of support for the Playhouse and to corroborate some of David's points about the more pragmatic aspects that the Playhouse contributes to the community. I run a small business in town, and I talk to literally hundreds of people a day, and I can tell you that the success of the Playhouse redounds to the success of local businesses. We get a lot of traffic that comes from the Playhouse, and speaking to lots of members of the community, and also a lot of people now visiting from outside the community. They come here for all of the various amenities that the city has to offer, including the Playhouse and the level of culture that's contributed by the Playhouse to the city. I think it adds to the charm of Sierra Madre, and then maybe more pragmatically adds to the property values of the city of Sierra Madre. And so I believe it would be a prudent investment by the city into the Playhouse and to the community in general. So I just want to thank you for hearing me, and I'd like to applaud everything that David and Todd and the members of the Playhouse have given to the city of Sierra Madre. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
No other speaker cards were submitted, Mr. Mayor.
I think we have one more.
Oh, one more. Jeanette Ladea.
Hello, council members. I'll be quick because I know it's been a long evening. I just want to say the Playhouse is an anchor to the city. Being a realtor, an anchor is very important. It's a staple, and we definitely need to maintain it. And as a chamber member, it really does help our businesses, our patronage, all the theater members. They go to the restaurants, they visit the local stores, so it's very important to keep it. I want to thank David for everything he does to keep the Playhouse lights on. Thank you so much for all your time. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Does that conclude public comment?
Yes, that was the
Okay,
last one.
thank you. I will conclude public comment, bring this back to our council. Do we need any more questions, any fiscal questions? Are we all satisfied with?
mean, Mr. Mayor, part of my comments would include clarification on some fiscal matters, but I don't know if it's gonna be answered tonight.
Okay. Did you want to raise those right now?
Well, you know, I was thinking here, I said, of all of my eight and a half years of sitting on, behind this dais, those were like the most compelling, best story told public comments I think I have heard, and I just so appreciate the passion and the emotion that belongs to it, that was brought to the microphone there. I think they're very worthy comments. I think very worthy arguments. Mr. Gordon, if you ever became an attorney and I had to sit opposite of you, I'd be extremely worried because you made such great points. And I think where I'm still at is the dollar amount and some of our other needs in the city. And so that's where I was saying, Mr. Mayor, some of my questions are more of, you know, as we've been talking about even sidewalks, and we've talked about water infrastructure, we've talked about even our staffing, is, you know, what our priorities are there, because I know we've asked for capital project lists. I know that we have some negotiations that might be coming up too with staffing. I am in full support of contributing to the campaign, but where I'm sitting right now is where that dollar amount might sit.
Yeah, so I asked a lot of questions about kind of what our financial situation is currently, and you know, economics is the dismal science, and we're probably on the brink of a recession, given our Federal Reserve Bank's current regime, unfortunately. But let me say, I am an economist, and let me say, I heard some comments that are things I've already been thinking. The gentleman, I can't remember your name, that owns Syndicate, brings up very important aspects, and so did Estelle Campbell. There's intangible assets, right, that drive value, but it's really hard to put a number on it. And I believe the Playhouse is one of those intangible assets. As we enjoy what we have, you can't really designate what it's worth, right? That's why I'm a big proponent of community services. They're one of the smallest departments in the city, but they bring this community feel together, and that's what the Playhouse does for me as well. So, you know, I'm in support of the Playhouse, and I fear for the other businesses if the Playhouse isn't there. We have so much retail and so much restaurant because the Playhouse helps supplement that, because people come in from out of town and spend their dollars here. And then we have, us as residents, have nice restaurants to visit because of the Playhouse. You know, that being said, kind of like what Councilmember Arizmetti's talking about, you know, we used to have a youth activity center that we used to staff. We can't afford it. We can't staff it anymore. We had a pool that we used to staff. We can't afford it. We can't staff it anymore. I know that's ongoing expenses rather than one capital contribution to infrastructure. I see the difference there. One other thing, I'd hate to see this version of the Playhouse die and then somebody else come in and take it over. That would be horrible. You know, so much community effort has been poured into this Playhouse. Currently, the volunteers really integrate into the community. David has been doing an amazing job of integrating our students. You know, other communities have community performing arts centers. We don't. You know, that's the whole balance between, like, it's a privately owned versus a public. It's not ours, but there are communities that have something similar, and I see the value there. But that being said, you know, I think I need more guidance on our current capital plans and projects. I need a little bit more guidance on how the appropriation works, because you know, reading the staff report, we can't give a gift to public funds, but we can just make an appropriation. That just makes it okay? I'm not really sure how that functions, so I would want kind of a legal opinion on that, rather than just saying it is so. But I'm in full support of the Playhouse. I can't imagine Sierra Madre without the Playhouse, frankly. But we're running a city here, so we need to make sure that we're contemplating all issues.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. There's really not much more to say other than I think that the city and the community's support for the Playhouse sort of goes without saying, and no one sitting here wants, the Playhouse to not be successful. I actually campaigned on kind of the intangibles that Mayor Pro Tem mentioned, in that, part of why I'm sitting here is to maintain the fiscal health of the city so that we don't have to cut services, so we don't have to decide that we really have to fund, obviously, the basic services that the city provides, such as police and water, and have those expenditures require cuts in the quality of life type programming that the city provides, through the Community Services Department and elsewhere. So it is a fine line to walk. I mean, I had no idea when I campaigned until I got into this role how much this city does, especially for its size. We are literally the smallest city in California that provides all services, full service. Fire department, police department, our own library, and you all know the sources of revenue in this town. So it's I'm not sure the entire situation, the fiscal situation, is fully transparent to the city. I mean, we've done an amazing job. I'll give lots of credit to the staff and former councils to really manage the finances well and manage through COVID well. But a lot of that management and that surplus is because we stopped spending money. we didn't replace staff members if they had to leave, and that's not sustainable. So there's this line that we have to walk between maintaining the quality of life and all of the things that we love about this town, and of course none of us want any of those to go away, with the fact that everything costs money and there has to be a prioritization. So I am fully on board with what everyone has said, but we need to look at this hard and really want to support the Playhouse. The Playhouse is an incredibly important part of this town, but we also have to just make sure that it fits in with the priorities, many of which for decades were ignored, and we have so much deferred maintenance. And not that I'm saying we need to sacrifice support for our current assets to sort of bring up to speed the deferred maintenance, but that is part of it as well. So it's a very tough conversation to have, and I know my heart says let's just give it all. Let's give $2.5 million. I mean, based on the outpouring of passion tonight, I mean, that's where I am here, but I have to have my head to intervene and make sure that we are making sure it fits in with the long-range plan, because this city has to survive on a pretty shoestring budget, and we provide a lot of services on that budget. So that's, I just want people to understand that's the dilemma that we face.
Well, you're looking at me. Well said. That's why I respect you guys so much. You're on top of everything as usual. And I can't really articulate any better than what I've heard. I think we do need to support the Playhouse. And to me, the question is how much? And I think that's what I'm hearing here. I'm going to lean on a more liberal version of this. I think I'd be closer to $250,000 to $350,000 of support, because primarily it's a cultural resource, and we just got a huge shot in the arm with our library. We not only got a $10 million appropriation to pay for some of the things we were planning on budgeting in the coming years that we don't have to pay for now. We also got a $330,000 grant from the state to help maintain the library as well. So I feel like we have a little bit more wiggle room in our budget than maybe we're expressing here. But I know I'm probably going to be way higher than everyone else. I don't have any unique insight. I think the discussion of the value of the cultural assets has been said. I think what Mayor Pro Tem says about how do you evaluate an intangible thing? How do you put a price tag on how is it valuable? I know this. When Mr. Proctor stood up there and said, "Can you imagine this?" Okay, well we have this, but can you imagine not having it? And how much is that worth? For me, it's worth about $250,000 in this budgetary year. That's what I would say. That's what I'd like to propose at this point in time. I'm ready to talk.
Yeah, I'm not there yet as far as making a decision on the dollar amount. I think there we need to see the unfunded projects. We need to contemplate those issues. I think Councilmember Arizmendi requested some of that, and I need to understand the vehicle, because we don't have an economic development fund. I wish we did, because then I would, it'd be easiest to fund this. I want to understand what an appropriation looks like and how we can do that legally, fully before we
Well,
I
I
commit to
take
it.
your point on that. I agree with that. I really want to make sure this is legal, so absolutely. And I don't know that we've been told that this is not illegal. I think when we heard about the precedent of paying for the marquee, I think we know we can expend public funds on behalf of the Sierra Madre Playhouse. The question is this public or not? I don't know. I would just have to defer to legal advice on this. But when it comes to the actual budgeting, I'm proposing, and it may not go around the table, I'm proposing that we make this out of the general fund. Call it a grant, call it an appropriation, call it whatever you want, but that's how I would do it.
I think I'd also, just to remind, because we already talked about this, but I'd also like to understand the ramifications of the public funding on the cost of the project, as we talked about before with the fair labor standards. The last thing I'd want to do is for us to give a portion of this capital campaign and somehow, escalate the cost, 30, 35%, and I'm sure that's not something that the Playhouse is looking for either. And so I think we just need to have better sense of that. Frankly, it sounds like, if this campaign is to get funded, most, if not all, of the money is going to be coming from government expenditures, and so maybe our situation is a little bit different. But I just want to make sure that we're thinking about that as well, and trying to structure this in such a way as to minimize any of those risks.
Very valid point. Yeah.
In addition to those, I know that I did request for some information on some capital projects, and I know we had some rough estimates on some projects, but I'd like to see that defined a little bit more and make sure that it encompasses all of the areas that we have discussed in the last couple of years.
I think ultimately I'm going to be in favor of some sort of support, so I just want to make that clear. But I also think that if there is support that we can give as council or with staff, with relationships that we have at these other levels of government, county, state, federal, if there's something that we can do also on that front, I think that could also be of value. It wouldn't be a specific dollar; it would be an intangible donation, perhaps. But that I would also like to hear if there's ways we can help with that process. I think we're beyond the introduction stage, but in terms of support or demonstration of support, such that is required by these grants, that can be demonstrated, not by a specific dollar amount, but by obviously the commitment that the city has to the preservation of the Playhouse.
And just as a follow-up to that, I know that I've offered my support to the board and to Mr. Gordon as to what I can do personally, but as is in terms of supporting with all of the other requests at the federal, county, state level. But I think if collectively we could do something too, I think it makes that request for them that much stronger.
So what I'm hearing here is we're not ready to make a funding decision tonight, but we want to bring this back with more specific discussion of where the funding might come from if we do. Is that correct? Is that where I'm coming? Okay.
Yeah, and I'm assuming that there's some urgency here, right, Mr. Gordon? Yeah, so I don't want to delay, sometimes how government works, right? So I don't think we should delay it. Hopefully we can get back soon. And
Well, I'm looking at the meetings though. We're not going to meet, we're only meeting once in December, right? Once in November. So we probably are delaying this into January, which is a significant problem, I think, in terms of the capital campaign. We'd like to get it going. We could call a special meeting. We could extend our meeting in, probably not our November meeting, no, not our December meeting, because we're going to install, we have reorganization.
I think we have historically, and not that this is necessarily what this council wants to do or this mayor wants to do, but we have had action items during reorg which have not been necessarily ideal. I think I definitely want to make sure that we are supporting, I know myself personally, I want to support the Playhouse with a dollar amount, but I think I will definitely need to understand all of the answers to these questions prior to doing that. And whether I'd be happy to, if there's a special meeting that can be called, but,
Can I ask, Mr. City Manager, the agenda for November 8th, the reorg agenda, December?
Traditionally, we try to keep that agenda light.
Right. Do we have anything prior to reorg already scheduled?
I don't have the list in front of me. One second.
I'm assuming that would give staff enough time to provide us the information we're requesting.
So I think that if council's okay with the December 13th meeting, we could bring that before.
Okay, well, when the meeting ends, I'll ask to formally agendize that. Okay. Any other comments before we?
I just want to make it clear that I didn't even know that the reorg meeting in December wasn't supposed to have action items, so I'm perfectly happy to have action items.
I as well, yes.
It just means the reorg happens later, that's all.
Right.
That's totally workable. Okay, well, I think that concludes our discussion of this agenda item, and we will put it off until our December meeting. Yes? Mr.
Mayor, if I may ask for, I have $250,000 as an amount. Is that the only amount that you would like us to consider?
Well, the Playhouse request is $350. I think that ought to be what we look at when we come back. Maybe I'll come across as being cheap with that $250,000. We'll see. I don't know. We'll see how much is in the budget.
Mayor, for the next time this is agendized, would you like us to come back with an opinion from the Department of Industrial Relations regarding
that would help.
Okay.
May I just comment on that, though? I mean, the fact that if we make a public gift of funds, that might create or a legal gift of funds, that would create a higher cost, doesn't change the fact that the Playhouse needs money up front to get started. So if it incurs a higher cost, at least their funding request gets them started on their capital campaign. But yes, I definitely would like that legal opinion.
Yeah, I think, Mayor, we'd also like to bring a list of potential projects that would not qualify for funding for
Okay.
council to
All right.
be aware of.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, we all good with this?
Yeah.
All right, that, I think, concludes our agenda, right?
Yes.
Yes, so I'd like to see if, I will go ahead and formally ask for that item to be on the agenda in December. Any other items for future agendas?
Yeah, on a related note, I'm wondering, we talked about AB 5 earlier, and Mr. Gordon mentioned that his understanding is that it's stuck in appropriations. I think we know the head of appropriations. I'm wondering if we can maybe, as either a council or staff, reach out to Holden's office and see if we can, throw some support behind that and see if that can get nudged.
Is it, yeah, if it's an Assembly bill or a Senate bill, I mean, that's.
I'm not sure where it's at, but either way, I think he could be helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, any other items? Is there a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.